Welcome to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network's Best of 2024 video series, presented by Playback. While you break out your holiday traditions and enjoy the festivities, join us on a look back that was the year in sports in 2024. This is the best of the MMA Outsiders 2024 with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Merry Christmas Eve, everybody, and welcome to the best of the MMA Outsiders for 2024. Here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, presented by Playback. I'm Tom Albano. That's Zain Bando. Zain, we have made it now to the end of the 2024 year in combat sports, and what a year it was. Today, we're going to look back on all the highs and all the lows and all the biggest headlines.
Yeah, looking forward to going through this with you today. As we usually do. What is this now? Our third year of doing these, so should be fun to look back and hopefully make some bold predictions for 2024 and hopefully see if or 2025 rather, and hopefully see if we're right or wrong, or as right or as wrong as we were this past year, because I think we did nail a few things, but I think you and I were both dead wrong on a few other things. So that's what makes this show interesting. So I'm excited to see what we come up with. And just so you guys know, because this isn't our typical routine, a lot of this is going to be a review of clips and less of us talking. So if you want a trip down memory lane, you've come to the right place.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, this is not going to be the only place where you'll get all the look back on 2024, but we got to get stuff out of the way. So first of all, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Again, follow us across social media at MMA Outsiders ETB on Twitter, on Instagram, and on TikTok, as long as TikTok is going to remain a thing here in the United States. Again, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe, youtube.com/UTV Network. Help us get to 900 subscribers at last. Help us get to 1,000. If you can't watch the show, then make sure to listen wherever you get your podcasts. Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so much more. And then, of course, the MMA Outsiders and everything else here at the ETV Network is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where you can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis, commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/YouTube Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. Obviously, with the ends of the MMA calendar, we're not going to have any fight studies anymore for 2024, but we will have one for 2025, the week leading into UFC 311. But that is then. Right now, we are here for the best of. We're going to look back at some of the best things, best headlines, top headlines. Top headlines would actually be more appropriate because not necessarily everything is best. Some of it's actually kind of on the worst end, but these are all the biggest headlines and some of our most popular clips as they were within 2024. We will dedicate a different show, which is our annual award show that will take place next week, to all of the stuff that happened in the cage, in the ring. This has some in the cage and in the ring stuff too. It's just more focused on the news elements themselves and the clips that, went out on social media that everybody was attracted to.
Yeah, that's a great way to clarify it. So for those of you who are specifically looking for awards, you're going to have to wait for that a little bit. But if you want the highs and lows of the years, that was almost every single week us bringing you guys the latest and greatest in combat sports. Again, and this is the spot for you. And I think we would be remiss if we did not at least remind everyone that I feel like going in a specific order is only going to make this year that was make a little bit more sense, just given all the madness that every single quarter brought. because it seemed like there was a different headline or a different unique story in almost every quarter, to where not really many of them crossed over. It was really in the headlines for that quarter, and then it kind of transitioned into a totally different story. And I'm sure you'd agree with that to a certain
Uh,
extent.
with the exception of one. So we're going to do it like we did last year, January by the quarter. So January, February, March, then a segment for April, May, June, then July, August, September, then October, November, December. I will say there are one or two headlines that kind of were overarching. And I think the centerpiece of all that, Zan, is this on, and I still say ongoing because even in 2025, it's still ongoing. This saga between Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler.
Yeah, well said, because it felt like we were building up to the fight for months and months and months in quarter one. And as we got into quarter two and quarter three, we were still talking about it, even though things had fizzled out. So I think that that's very well said.
Yeah, so quarter one, definitely the beginning of the whole McGregor Chandler thing. I shouldn't even say beginning because we technically that was part of 2023 as well, but 2024 you have more McGregor Chandler stuff. You also saw in 2020 at the start of 2024 Joshua Ngannou being booked and then that fight happening, which made me kind of glad that Ngannou took a little bit of a break from the boxing realm. Uh, we did see Kayla Harrison signing with the UFC. We saw Fury Usyk was supposed to be in February, and that fight ended up uh, getting held off. You did also see a little bit of the saga for the PFL kind of beginning because you saw Chris Cyborg coming out with a claim about the negotiations between the fight that she would ultimately end up winning with between her and Larissa Pacheco that ended up happening in October. John Anik. Here was a clip, that wasn't the top element, but it was a top clip for us, and John Anik and his comments toward the beginning of the year about how toxic the MMA community had been on social media. And unfortunately, I think that's just gotten worse as time has gone on.
Yeah, and then there were those rumblings that he might leave his post as the play-by-play commentator moving forward. That thankfully didn't happen, but that was definitely an undercovered story that we tried to hit as much as we possibly could.
You also saw the beginning of the Jake Paul Mike Tyson saga because I think it was in March that it got announced for July.
Yep, that sounds right.
Uh,
And then May is when everything hit the fan.
Yep. As I said, Kayla Harrison signed with the UFC. Actually, no, I didn't say it. Kayla Harrison signed with the UFC was very early on. It was one of the biggest headlines to start the year. Was that bombshell? Because I remember coming home late one night from work, and it was like 9-10 o'clock, and I'm like, okay, what have I missed? Oh,
Yeah.
that's what I missed. And then, yeah, that was a lot of Q1. We did also see some rumblings over on the business side, however, with TKO. Two big things. Number one, Vince McMahon officially being axed from TKO. Didn't really affect the UFC side, but noteworthy as to the corporate structure. And then number two, you saw the settlement that was issued to the fighters, which ultimately ends up becoming a storyline in and of itself later in the year.
Yeah, and that was one where we weren't really sure what to make of it when it occurred. But at the time that it did occur, we were all like, "Oh, this could be really interesting." And then, of course, how could we be remiss without talking about, as we're getting in, as we're slowly getting towards the time they're going to see some of these. The, this was also during the saga of the whole debate. Was UFC 299 more stacked than UFC 300 during all the speculation as to who would headline UFC 300, and that felt like we beat a dead horse for weeks on end until we finally figured out who was going to headline 300. Because
Yeah, that's part of the Q1 clips is Pat and
yep,
I's initial reactions to Pereira Hill getting announced for 300. Which, looking back, I mean, I think I kind of had to eat my words on that one.
yeah, and it only makes sense that McGregor Chandler was the biggest story in Q1, considering our impressions were considerably higher than any other clip that we had put out to that point.
Oh, I don't think it's the top of Q1. I think it's just the top story of 2024 itself.
Fair enough.
You could honestly make a whole best of that of our McGregor Chandler themed clips.
Yeah, you probably could.
A whole timeline video, whatever. All right, go check out some of our top clips from Q1 of 2024, and we'll discuss Q2 in just a sec.
I'm shocked that, Francis Ngannou is going to be competing. I shouldn't say shocked. He went toe-to-toe with the WBC heavyweight champion in Tyson Fury, but Francis Ngannou, for those who are saying he fumbled the bag, continuing to prove he did not fumble the bag in spite of what you may think. And third of all, Zan, once again,
because of course it does. It's like we say every single week, but yeah, that's the hand that they were dealt, and Saudi Arabia is going to Saudi Arabia, and these are the two fights that you end up with, and I don't have a pick for either because these are completely fresh fights, but it definitely makes that whole week of March 8th, March 9th super enticing, considering that you have UFC 299 the following day, so it's going to be combat sports heaven that weekend for sure. You think that the UFC has maybe lost a step or maybe can't figure out the one main event that's going to tip the fans over the edge, everything seems to always work out.
You're right. That's true.
It's sure enough, according to the unofficial script, and Sean Strickland loses to the dream middleweight title fight that we couldn't get for 7 months is now potentially back on. This is exactly what 90% of the MMA community wanted, and this is what we're gonna get now. So
I know, and it seems crazy because so many people are complaining about Duplessis winning, but I think they're forgetting the fact that him and Adesanya is a massive fight. It is a massive fight. There is so much hype that the UFC put into it, so much hype that both fighters put into it, and I feel like it's a fight that needed to happen. So I'm happy that it is happening for a championship.
And I'm going to make a bold statement and say that this is the biggest middleweight title fight since Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen 2 in 2012. Dana White was asked at the UFC 297 post-fight presser about the status of Conor McGregor's long-awaited return to the UFC in a potential fight with Michael Chandler, and he put it very simply: when we are ready to announce Conor McGregor's return and against who, we will let you know, which left everybody in a total panic that maybe Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler won't happen. I am still going to go out on a women's. It will happen. I think it's more so just about negotiations at this point and what card we're going to eventually do this on. But I think that, when it comes to Conor McGregor, they want to make it a special announcement, and I think that's why they've been keeping it under wraps for so long. What do you think?
I would have to agree. I think when Conor's fight gets announced, everyone will know about it. Most definitely, everyone will know that Conor McGregor is fighting, and I think they just got to wait for they have to wait for the right time. But two, I just think that they're still working some things out there. I don't know if he'll end up fighting Chandler. I don't know what's going on. I'm pretty sure that Conor will return this year, but against who, I couldn't tell you. But they're definitely going to make it a point to make that announcement a very big deal.
I would say, though, the former UFC heavyweight champion who ended up becoming and WWE champion, who they were trying to resign. I don't know if we can say, but obviously other reports have been naming him because, again, it can only refer to one person. But for the safety of us, I will not say his name. But I think what the only effect here for the MMA side, Zan, is that we'll probably never see that person ever again.
No. It's just as much as people were trying to hype up a potential return later this year at a certain card, that's all dead and gone and will never be discussed probably ever.
Again, I feel like that fight with Pennington and Silva, Zan, I think that did more damage than we realize. I think Dana saw that fight, saw the lack of names at 135 and said, all right, triple time. We need to get this deal done.
Well, yeah, it's without a doubt. I think it's the biggest women's MMA signing since he signed Cyborg for sure. I mean, this is big. It reinvigorates 135. It gives 135 buzz it arguably has not had since Ronda Rousey was a of the division. Like it's a major signing. I think one thing that the UFC was looking for in that, Kayla Harrison wants to be known as the greatest female combat athlete ever, and he felt that the only way she could do that before she retired was by going to the UFC and testing herself against who she feels are the best fighters in the world. So to be quite honest with you, if the deal was right, which apparently it seemed like it was, number one, and number two, if this is something that she really wanted to do, I cannot fault the UFC and her for making this decision. And yeah, I do think she can make 135 just based on the fact that Dana did say that she's done a couple of test runs and it's gone very well for her, but it's going to be the real test and it's time for the actual fight. And we're 3 weeks away from April 13th to see if she can actually. I just think too, like on the whole Anik discussion, like people just need to chill. He's a play-by-play commentator for a reason. He saw the fight one way. You have to remember, he's calling a live fight. He's not going to be able to remember everything that happens until he gives it a second rewatch. As with anybody who's broadcasting anything, or for you to come out and say, for you to come out and say, "Oh, you're totally wrong. You don't know what you're talking about." No. The guy that has 10 years of professional experience is him. You don't.
Right, exactly. And Zan,
so you can't say that. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Amen. And may I also remind everybody that, when a lot of people, including his fellow commentators and Joe Rogan and Dana Cormier, were writing Leon Edwards off, it was John Anik's words about that's not the cloth he's built from, and that ended up, being followed by the head kick knockout around the world. John Anik knows what the F he's talking about.
Of course. And he's a consummate professional. He was even a consummate professional in his statement. And to be honest with you, I'm just going to put it to you straight. He has absolutely nothing to apologize for.
No,
at all.
Not. Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, they're just, yeah. But they're not doing it in a cage. They're doing it on social media.
Yeah, it seems like they can never get away from each other. It seems like they want to fight at UFC 300. Everyone's writing up stories about it, myself included, and it seems to be taking the internet by storm on Google News. So that's a positive. But we still don't know. We still don't know if and when this fight is happening. All we know is hearsay, and really the only thing that we can say about it is that we won't believe it until they're sitting across from each other at a press conference, and that's about it.
Oh no, Zan, I'm not going to believe it until they actually go into the cage.
Okay.
At this point, I have no hope at this point until I actually see the two in the normal circumstances. Zan, the politics of boxing would have effed that up, but it actually goes to something that I think we talked about last week. That we were debating about what was going to happen, and I think you kind of alluded it. Saudi Arabia knows what it wants, and Saudi Arabia, with all their money and power, they're going to get what they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one way or another, Saudi Arabia is going to get what they want, and it's great that you mentioned that, because I think if this was anywhere else in the world, under any other promoter or any other sanctioning body, knowing boxing the way you and I know the sport, this fight is delayed maybe a year and a half. But that times are changing now, that there's more money involved, now that there's more distribution deals, now that there's more people who have a seat at the table, so to speak. We're going to see situations like this where if a fight is pushed back, there's really not so much to worry about. And what kind of blows me away, what would be the MMA equivalent of this is, could you have imagined if all the way back in 2020, if Saudi Arabia was involved in the UFC, I think you could have seen a scenario where it could be he versus Tony Ferguson maybe happens under a scenario like this. Go ahead. Sorry.
Or Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou, and maybe Francis never leaves to us recording. Actually, minutes before we started recording, I think she put out another tweet that reads, "I'm 39 years old in July. You can't put me on the shelf, stop me from competing MMA for 9 to 10 months, and then force me back against an opponent 10 years younger when I'm healthy and ready to compete. I've agreed to fight Larissa Pacheco. Why can't a fight be made March, April, May? I've been out of MMA since October."
All fair points.
Oh, by the way, actually something interesting that I'm noting. at least, of course, we're talking about this on the Cyborg side. We haven't heard the PFL side of things. A Twitter user by the name of Chris Ryder. Have you picked up the phone and called them? LOL. I guess trying to be a troll. And Cyborg says, call went unanswered after the news of Kayla at UFC 300. I guess PFL was kind of blindsided by the Kayla news, just as everybody else.
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting, and there's definitely something going on that no one knows, and who knows, maybe no one will ever know unless this fight is
I
actually
understand
made.
Zan's point that it looks like the UFC, and like we were just talking about, didn't really have much of a choice. They needed a main event, and I think they're putting a lot of, that Alex Pereira, considering all that he's done in his short time in the UFC with his feud with Izzy and winning the light heavyweight title, becoming a 2-division champ in such a short time in MMA, that he's got all the star power and that maybe he's what is needed at this point for UFC 300. But considering, Izzy and Drickus, considering Connor Chandler, which we'll get into, I can't help, Pat, but feel a little bit of disappointment at this.
Oh, I mean, there definitely has to be some disappointment. Dana's words after UFC 297 were that we weren't going to be able to handle the main event. And I'm sorry, but everyone already thought this fight was going to headline UFC 301. I mean, I'm pretty sure that was the plan and that it just got pushed back. So the fact that Dana acted like it was this thing we were never going to hear of makes me think that he was working on something else at that time that they were forced last minute. I mean, Jamal Hill said that this fight was offered to him on Friday. And I think it might have been already offered for 301, but offered for 300. He said it was offered to him on Friday. So I don't know how you can think that the UFC wasn't forced to work out something last minute. It had to be a last minute option. It had to be, just a last resort, basically, because they didn't want this fight to headline 300. They wanted it to headline 301.
Right. And I mean, I get it in terms of the championship structure, but when you look at those fights, because now I can't say UFC 300 is a bad card because you look at all the star power and all the matchups on there. I mean, you just look at the undercard with Aljamain Sterling making his featherweight debut, Kayla Harrison making her UFC debut, Charles Oliveira returning to the cage, Yuri Prohaska returning to the cage. There's a lot of names and a lot of interesting matchups.
And also, let me just say, I am sick of the rematches. For UFC 301, I am sick of the rematches. I know we're either going to get Pantoja Moreno or Pantoja Royval, and I'm done with it, okay? Can we stop the rematches at flyweight and let the young guys fight for the title? We have Muhammad Mokaev. We have Tatsuro Taira. I know they're not ranked as highly yet. They don't have that marquee win. You know what? Neither did Islam Makhachev. And look what we're dealing with now with Islam Makhachev. So I don't care. I'm done with the rematches. I do not want to see another Brandon versus Brandon, another freaking Pantoja versus Moreno, Pantoja versus Royval. I'm done with it. I'm actually done with it. Can we just get fresh blood in this division? It's been like 4 years now where it's just been rematches. What is up with the UFC in this flyweight division? They have good fighters, they have talent, and they just keep doing rematches. And it's so annoying, man. Like, I don't want to see the same fights over and over again anymore. I'm over
Alvarez, and he's one and done with PBC. So, our old friend Rick Glazer was right. He had a feeling that Canelo was going to depart PBC, and here we are. So kind of sad, but at the same time, Zan, the Jermell Charlo fight didn't really sell well and wasn't a great fight. What were they expecting trying to get Jermall Charlo in there, which again, I still can't believe he went 29 months without a fight and still was able to be a WBC champion. Absolutely frustrating. And I just don't know. I think, Zan, this is more on PBC than it is Canelo.
I think so too, but as other people alluded to, it just bums me out that you may never see him fight David Benavidez. It's a real bummer.
I know, but I guess it depends upon what the future and the fate of PBC is. Obviously, they've got the Amazon deal, but the fact that they're not going to hold a non-pay-per-view card until June, I'm sorry, that's sickening.
Yeah, I agree. Especially sickening if fighters were promised fights in other months that are now being pushed to June, where they may not even know if they'll fight or not. I think Dana White said it best. Usually, when these crossover fights happen, they happen, in his words, just like that, and that is exactly what Anthony Joshua put on in the second round with a devastating knockout of the former UFC heavyweight champion. what were your overall thoughts on this boxing match? I bet that it it wasn't too long of a fight, but overall, is this the win that Anthony Joshua needed to get his confidence back? And even though Francis Ngannou isn't done with boxing, would be different. I think he needs to go to the PFL as soon as possible. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I understand why Francis wants to stay in because of that cash, baby, that cash. I get it, but I don't think he should for his own health and own image sake because that was tough. I mean, that was the first time we've ever seen Francis get knocked out, and it couldn't have been worse for him, to be honest. I mean, God, what a right hand by Anthony Joshua. Like,
brutal.
Seriously. I mean, that's the thing. I knew Joshua could finish him. I just thought it might be a later TKO, maybe due to fatigue on Francis's part and stuff like that. I did not think he was going to put him out that early, that clean, and just that bad, honestly. I mean, that was really tough for Ngannou. I agree completely that he should just go to the PFL, get back to MMA, which is his strong point, and start taking heads off over there. But Joshua, his confidence should definitely be back after a win like this. He's one of the top heavyweights. He's been for years and years and years. And I mean, maybe if Tyson Fury beats Usyk, we can finally see Joshua versus Fury. And at this point in their careers, maybe Joshua's favored in that fight. I don't know. I mean, it's a tough call for sure, but I think Joshua's getting right back into things, and I think we'll see him in a couple more marquee matchups coming
Middle
up.
of the weight last week. Mike Tyson, 57 years old, coming out of retirement, is going to be taking on Jake Paul in a Netflix special Saturday, July 20th, according to the official press release, which I have to my left from Most Valuable Promotions. Mike Tyson is very excited to face Jake Paul. Part of this quote here: "My sights are set on becoming a world champion, and now I have a chance to prove myself against the greatest heavyweight champion ever, the baddest man on the planet, and the most dangerous boxer of all time. This will be a fight of a lifetime." When I first saw it, and when I woke up out of bed on the morning it was announced, I thought that someone had duped me. I thought it was a tease. I went on Instagram. I saw the graphic. I went to my email, and boom, the first email that came up was the press release I was just reading to you now. I could not believe it was real news. Pat, what do you think? Me personally, I don't think the Texas Commission should be sanctioning this fight. I think that any commission who even remotely considered sanctioning this fight should be ashamed of themselves. And I think as this fight does happen, I don't think it should happen for the safety of Tyson. And I think, kind of as I alluded to in my instant reaction video that we posted all over the ETB socials about a week or so ago, I think that this fight is a disgrace. I think it's a travesty, and I think it's really sad that Jake Paul is even entertaining this, especially if he wants to be considered even remotely close to a legitimate boxer. This isn't it.
I think you're spot on, Zan. I think you're spot on. I hate this. This is disgusting. This is disgusting to combat sports. This is a disgrace to the sport. And I think it's ridiculous that, like you said, anyone would commission this fight. I think this is absurd. I mean, everything I said. I mean, it's disgusting. It really is. I think it's gross, and I don't understand how the hell this was allowed to get.
Couldn't tell. I was super excited to see this because hopefully, quote unquote, this fight is closer to fruition and actually happening than maybe it was about 11 or 12 months ago. And I think it's hilarious that the next topic we're going to be talking about is The Ultimate Fighter, considering that these two were coaches and were scheduled to fight either in August or December of last year, and it did not happen. And now this fight is being rolled around again, and potentially for the summer calendar. Pat, I know you kind of told me off the air that you don't really read much into these future odds, but given that it is Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, what are your thoughts? And do you think this fight does take place at UFC 303 as a headliner on June 29th in Las Vegas for International Fight Week?
So despite not reading much into the odds being released, I do think that this fight will be the headliner for UFC 303 International Fight Week. I do think it's what the plan is. I think both guys want it. I think it's what's going to happen, to be honest. But I just, like I said, just don't read too much into the leak, because we saw this happen with Bilal Muhammad and Leon Edwards for UFC 300. Obviously, that fight never came to fruition. So I don't necessarily think this is a guarantee now that it's happening because it was leaked on DraftKings. But like you said, I think we're getting closer and closer, and this is just another step to it finally actually getting announced for that card. And I mean, I hope it does at this point. This fight needs to happen. Chandler's waited how long for it? McGregor's been waiting for it too, it seems. It seems like the UFC might be playing a big part in why this fight hasn't happened. So I really just think that it needs to happen.
Yeah, in my opinion, in reading dozens and dozens of articles on this fight over the last year and a half, there's some sort of contract stipulation that the UFC does not want publicly out, and that's what I think is holding the fight up. And I think this
agree.
is one of those contract stipulations that even if this fight does happen, no one will ever know about it, and the UFC will refuse until Dana White is on his deathbed that it happened the way that you have to factor in. I don't know this for certain, but most of the info, which has now been deleted because Bloody Elbow went away, most of the info that was discussed in those longer form pieces were in relation to fighters that never became world champions. Well, I think we would be looking at this at a different lens if some of those fighters that publicly came out and said, "Oh, that this is happening, that we're world champions," as opposed to guys who were on the prelims. I think we'd have an entirely different perspective looking back on it.
Which, by the way, you mentioned Bloody Elbow, and it's a shame what's happened to them because they were doing a hell of a lot of work with involving around this story, and now, basically, because of politics and because of business, all that work is basically.
Yes, what I can say is, I mean, at this point, the show ended in August. We're still waiting. This fight's either happening June 29th or it's not happening at all. At this point, make the fight so people can start making their travel plans and whatever. Because at the end of the day, this fight needs to get made. There's a score to be settled. There's tons of bad blood. I want to see the fight. You want to see the fight. The world wants to see the fight. Our producer wants to see the fight. Everybody wants to see it. So, well, I think as long as they can get a day together and as long as they can get a press conference in place, this fight will happen. And I'm going to be hopeful and say that in the next 14 days, post the Final Four, and this fight will officially get announced, and everybody can rejoice that the UFC summer plans are going to be one of the best summer schedules in the history of the sport. That is a bold prediction that I am willing to make on March 26th at the time this is going to be airing, that this fight will happen on June 29th. There's going to be no questions asked 100%. I think it will.
Zan, did you know that Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler has official theme music? Because I know that Conor Floyd, they had that killer song, The Man. But McGregor Chandler also has a theme to it.
All right, that was a look back on the first 3 months of 2024, and now on to the second 3 months of 2024, which, as you noted before, we went into the first part of the clips. The first section of clips. We had UFC 300 very early on in that quarter, and you saw, well, McGregor and Chandler officially becoming a thing with their date locked in for June 29th. And
which I think was overshadowed from the entire card because it was literally Dana White getting a piece of paper and saying, "Hey guys, I have a couple of announcements. Number one, Islam versus Poirier in Newark, New Jersey, and number two, Conor versus Chandler." And the whole room just goes bonanza. They couldn't believe it. So
yeah,
when we saw that, we thought we were in for a summer of epic proportions, and unfortunately, I think we were let down a little bit.
Well, not to anyone's fault. I mean, maybe the UFC's, maybe Conor's, but nevertheless, and it said it kind of overshadowed. It kind of got overshadowed because UFC 300. I mean, UFC 300. Actually, no, I'm not going to say it's sad because you know my thoughts about this McGregor Chandler saga. But UFC 300 had just an amazing card, which topped, as you mentioned, Alex Pereira retaining the light heavyweight title. But I mean, come on, You can't talk about UFC 300 without talking about Max Holloway's knockout of Justin Gaethje. Probably the knockout of the year. Probably the moment of the year in MMA. Maybe I'm letting up a little too much about next week's show.
Yeah, I may have been sick that night, but I could definitely tell you that I will never forget being awake to see that unbelievable finish in the final seconds of round 5, because it woke me up from the nap I took. So that's one of those where I feel like you had to watch it either live in the arena or on TV to really encapsulate the moment, because watching it afterward, I don't think personally does it justice, but that's just me though. So
for sure. And then you actually saw more McGregor pop-ups, including him becoming the part owner of BKFC. And then, of course, McGregor, Chandler, as well as Paul Tyson in quarter 2. Everything just starts to crumble down. And you have Paul Tyson getting postponed till November. And then, Zan, I actually had to look and add in a whole bunch of clips from episode 88 alone, because that was the episode where the you-know-what hit the fan, when McGregor was out of 303, and then 303 needed a new main event, a new co-main event. They took Carlos Wolberg, there's Andy Smith, they moved it down, and that's not even mentioning, which we'll talk about in Q3 as part of the recap, how Dan Ige got called in on the day of the card. Like, you saw UFC 303 just 2 weeks before it was supposed to happen just get shaken up to its core.
Not only was it shaken up to its core, the card was actually halfway decent. even with that,
it still proved to be one of the best cards of the year, which I don't know goes to, how good the talent on that card was, and how, Dana and Hunter Campbell are as promoters and matchmakers, or if the rest of the calendar year just did not stack up.
Well, they probably went as desperation mode as possible, because you and I both know that some of those fights were going to determine who was going to fight in September, October, and November. So those few events that we just mentioned, they were probably sitting on their hands going, what in the world are we going to do if these certain outcomes go the way that we think they will? And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. I mean, even you bringing it up months later, still gives me goosebumps and anticipation, because we literally didn't know at that particular time what the hell was going to happen from August through October. We had no idea.
Yeah.
All we knew was when the Ultimate Fighter finale was going to be, in a few random fight night events, and that was about it. That's all we did. That's all we knew.
The other thing was, it was International Fight Week. You needed a strong main event for International Fight Week, so they go with Pereira versus Yuri for a reason. And that's another big storyline to this card. To this year, is just how many times Alex Pereira had to save the UFC.
Yeah, and we'll get into that more when we do our awards. But I feel like if you're already getting the wavelength of this best stuff, we're probably going to be talking about Alex Pereira a whole heck of a lot next week, because he was 70% of saving the UFC's ass, if you will, in terms of major main events this year. So,
And you also had a little boxing drama in this quarter as well, with Oleksandr Usyk becoming the first undisputed heavyweight champion of the 4-belt era, which lasts maybe a month after and the IBF strips him of the championship.
Because of course they did.
Because where is it? There it is.
There you go. It's probably the last time you will see that in the physical calendar year of 2020.
Actually, no, I'm going to do it one more time, because we also had Ryan Garcia's fall from grace, going from his failed drug test to getting arrested, all in this quarter.
That's right. And spoiler alert, he's fighting in an exhibition match at the end of the year against a guy who I've never heard of.
Is that still on? Because I heard him, the promoter didn't approve, and it's probably off.
Oh, well, if you heard that the promoter didn't approve it, you're probably right.
Or Ryan's promoters, I don't know.
Still licit. So
I don't know. Ryan Garcia is he's a loose cannon.
Well said. Biggest loser in the whole situation was Devin Haney. You know that.
It was probably boxing as a whole, because you think of all the matchups that they could have had with Haney with a win over Ryan, or what they could have done with Ryan afterward. It's a lose-lose. Everybody lost in that one.
Right.
So, yeah. And then on top of that, by the way, when all the 303 madness was going on, we also had Chimaev falling ill, and all of a sudden the UFC Saudi Arabia main event needed a replacement.
Yeah, which that ended up working out pretty well for Robert Whittaker, didn't it?
Well, at the time it did.
Yeah.
All right. Go check out these clips. We'll be back with you for the next part.
We were sitting here thinking that Chimaev was going to be potentially next for Leon Edwards, and now he's going back out to middleweight, and he's fighting Robert Whittaker, and I assume if he beats Whittaker, what championship does he go after? Because there's a bunch of scenarios here where if he beats Whittaker, the welterweight and middleweight worlds become his oyster.
Yeah, I was going to say, whatever he decides to do is going to be massive.
But I assume, if Islam loses to Dustin and Islam's ready to go, then they could do a rematch in Abu Dhabi. But if Islam's not ready to go in Abu Dhabi in October, I assume Chimaev's the backup headliner.
That would be my guess too. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, this is a outstanding main event. Stylistically, these are two high action packed fighters. Robert Whittaker is obviously a former UFC middleweight champion. He's very much playing the Max Holloway role, pretty similarly, where he can beat everybody, but he can't beat the champion. And this is more than likely his last chance at a title shot. Otherwise, he may not get one again, considering that he's getting up there in age. And you have Khamzat Chimaev, who's had all this hype around him over the last 5 years, has really only beat maybe 1-2 quality opponents, but the rest is really it. This is his first real test, and it's going to be really interesting to see, how he fares against someone that has so much middleweight championship experience like a Robert Whittaker. And people forget that Khamzat Chimaev doesn't really have 5-round experience that maybe people may think he does. So overall, this fight can go multiple different ways. But what I do know is this is setting up to be one of the best non-title fights of the entire year.
There's speculation that either at the press conference that happens tonight or during the UFC 300 pay-per-view broadcast itself on Saturday, Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler will finally be announced, and most likely for International Fight Week at UFC 303. It's about damn time!
You couldn't have said it better, Tom. Seriously. I mean, thank God they're finally announcing it. I get that they waited, I guess to the time when everyone's got their eyes on the UFC. Everyone's going to be watching the press conference and stuff. But man, I feel like this could have been its own announcement separately from everything else because of how big it is. It would have pulled numbers, pulled everyone's attention when Conor McGregor makes his return to the octagon. So I don't think they needed to do it during UFC 300 week, but I guess it works out for everyone.
Yeah, it does actually work out for everybody, but at the same time, it's just been all this frustration, Pat. I mean, I think Zan kind of worded it best a couple of weeks ago. Tough 32 is going to be premiering, and technically Tough 31 won't be finished yet.
Yeah, that is crazy to think about for sure, because I mean, we've been waiting for so long for this that we're already on a new Tough season. I mean, it's a damn TV show, and we're already on the new season of it before the old one can really wrap up. So I'm just happy that it finally seems like this fight will actually happen now. But like you had said, I won't believe it until I see him in the cage across from each other.
I mean, it's just something absolutely unreal how long it has taken and all the hullabaloo going back to when they were first announced as coaches in February of 2023.
That everybody has been wanting to see for over a year is done. Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Marking on your calendars. UFC 303, June 29th, culminating with UFC International Fight Week at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Tom, we have a deal. It's official. Can you believe it?
At last! It's finally happened! It only took you so long, but you finally did it. Hold on. You finally made it happen. Oh my God. And this comes also about a week or so after, or is it a day or so
A
after
day
Dana,
or so after.
Dana at the Power Slap press conference, like, oh no, that's all internet BS.
Yeah, well, it's the internet. The internet BS part was partially true because the question was more so about a video package potentially being played ahead of this announcement. When what it really was Dana for the first time apparently being handed a piece of paper which had a bunch of announcements, and of course this ended up being the one. And then of course all the assembled media that were there went crazy, and rightfully so. Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler is done 5 rounds. 170 pounds, the main event of UFC 303 again, and June 29th, as we've alluded to. I'm just going to say this. As someone who has been to Las Vegas to a Conor McGregor fight in the past, I thought the McGregor-Poirier 3-fight week was crazy. This is going to be on another level. You're going to get people in Las Vegas that weekend that don't even know what MMA is, but know who Conor McGregor is. You're going to get people very similar to myself, who are the diehard junkies. You're going to get celebrities that maybe only watch all the major sporting events, and they consider it's one of them. Las Vegas is going to be the place to be, whether you're or to party or whether you're or to see Conor McGregor or Michael Chandler win. It is going to be aimed at June 29th.
How would this have been, Zan, if Justin was the one who knocked out Max at the end?
Oh, Tom, people would have been flipping chairs. People would have been breaking TVs. It would have been an absolute mess. It would have been crazy. The entire T-Mobile Arena roof might have exploded.
It would have been one of the greatest comeback finishes in history, just like Anderson Silva Chael Sonnen was.
Do you think people would have attempted to storm the cage, or no?
I would hope not.
Jeez, yeah. Thankfully, it would have been like boxing. Nonetheless, one of the craziest last 10 seconds you've ever seen. I mean, that was just absolute savagery. I mean, you mean to tell me Max Holloway in the Ring of Fire points to the center of the canvas?
Wait, he doesn't have to because he's about to win the fight.
Right?
He's like, let's go. Let's do it. Slug.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think Ines said it best when he said that the UFC finally had its Arturo Gatti moment, which I would respectfully agree with for sure.
Yes,
the emotional hit was cool. The whole thing was beautifully choreographed and genius. The whole thing, the Rolls Royce and the whole thing. But there are so many questions surrounding this that I don't even know where
Did you hear what David? Well, David Feldman is hoping for like expansion into more markets now that McGregor's there.
I did. I heard because I had to write a story about it.
Okay, but you heard the post-fight press conference statement, right?
Yeah. That's where I got the quotes from. Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So for those who didn't know, here's what David Feldman had to say, because he was asked at the UFC at the Knucklemania 4 post-fight press conference. Do you think Dana White is a little mad, punching the air? And he said this, quote, "Listen, Dana White has a juggernaut with the UFC. Conor McGregor certainly moves the needle for him, but he's very, very successful without him. Not that he's fighting for us, but as him promoting our product, who knows? You're probably a little mad your number one star is going to be talking about a different company. So you're probably not very happy about it. But he's probably not worried about us. Not yet." Basically insinuating that BKFC is probably going to end up competing with the UFC at some point.
For the sport of boxing 100%, but it would be an example of boxing getting in its own way, because unfortunately, this is one of those cases then where history will say one thing and our eyes will kind of say another.
Right.
When I say
exactly.
history, I mean the record books, because
exactly.
he did win that fight, Ryan Garcia, and basically because of that, any hopes for anything like a Haney versus Tank were out the window. And now, if this drug test really is positive and the B sample comes positive, that's multiple fights in that division that get ruined.
Yeah, it certainly is multiple fights in the division that get ruined in it, and it'll more than likely light a fire under Devin Haney that he's probably still kicking himself less than a month later that he didn't win this fight as he felt he was the better fighter, and that's the part that frustrates me the most. Is I don't think the better fighter won on that night, and if this sample doesn't come negative, like I alluded to earlier, it'll further refute the point that that Haney was in his head, and I think that's something that Ryan Garcia fans are failing to realize, is that you can't have someone that tries to bend the rules and and you still think that they have a fan base. This could very easily like tarnish the remainder of his career if he doesn't act accordingly in the ways that people hope he does.
Imagine, Zan, that knockdown doesn't get ruled. First of all, let's go to that knockdown.
Okay.
Do you think the referee made the right decision in calling it a knockdown and not waving it off?
According to the rules, yeah, but according to the majority of public opinion, probably not. You asked for my opinion, and I think it could have very, very well, based on the way Fury was moving, it could have been stopped easily, in my opinion. Or it should have.
Especially because the ropes were basically holding him up by the time that the referee
Right.
stepped in.
Like, what do you what do you want him to do? Fall out of the ring and through the ropes? Like,
I think it's more of a matter. I think it's more of a matter of a betting angle, because that
Oh, you
if the
do?
referee.
Oh,
No. But I agree with you that the
Okay.
it wasn't a standing 8 count because the ropes held him up, but.
Right.
But I think the referee made the right decision. But I understand the frustrations of people, because that was a point. It was probably the best point where Usyk could have gotten a finish.
Now,
And
why do
at
you
that
why do you think a 10 count was instituted instead of the round just ending like normal?
because under boxing rules, there's no say by the bell.
Right. Okay.
So I think the last round is the exception, but there's no save by the bell. If
Right.
so, that's why the referee did. Look, the ropes were holding him up. The ropes were holding Fury up. He would have gone down if they weren't there. The round was coming to an end, but the referee followed the rules of boxing. It was the
Really
right
a
call.
very unique main event in the sense that we did not see the Edson Barboza that we were used to seeing, and it seemed to me like Murphy was able to do whatever he wanted to him.
I mean, in all fairness, Barboza had Murphy hurt at the end of the first round with that up kick.
No, I know.
So,
But
I mean,
there wasn't enough time though.
Oh, you're right. And Murphy basically took control, started to swing away in the second and third, and basically, as you said, was able to do whatever he wanted with Barboza. But even Murphy said in the post-fight comments afterward, it wasn't an easy fight. Like he was the crafty veteran that Barboza was. And by the way, Lerone Murphy talked about maybe trying to do a turnaround to compete on the Manchester card, because Lerone is a Manchester native, but there's a little concerns he might be a little too banged up. He walked into the I shouldn't say walk. He came into the ESPN, the UFC on ESPN studios on crutch.
Personally think that the fight is still going to happen, but they're probably not going to go ahead and reschedule this press conference just because there isn't enough time with over 3 weeks to go. That's a pick. I'm going to go with the safer. I wouldn't say that the fight is still going to happen for the sanity of everybody, but at this point, I would not be surprised with anything. So,
and the thing is, and Ariel pointed this out on his show, if you look at Conor's tweet, his statement where he says he's looking forward to getting in there, putting on one of the greatest all-time shows, he never says anything about June 29th. Should that be something of a concern, or is that something of a reach? Because Ariel said he doesn't want to read too much into that, but he does find that very interesting.
I think people are reading too much into that. He may have just forgotten to include it. There could be multiple reasons.
Now, we've also heard of potential reasons could be that Conor canceled. Now, Conor has canceled all media obligations, so it could be something. And see, the thing is, I hear the Conor injury rumors that are very prevalent as of the time we're recording this, but Ariel has already said that the fault does not lie within the Conor. Zhang stopping Deontay Wilder, needing just 5 rounds to do it, and Wilder used his power early, and he rocked Zhang early, but he gassed out, and Zhang was able to take advantage and knocked him out pretty violently. Good on Zhang. He continues to he continues to surge up very late in his career. And as far as Wilder goes, in the words of one very famous bald-headed UFC CEO, I'd like to see him retire.
Yeah, I would like to see Wilder retire too. The fights with Fury, this fight, some of his other lackluster performances over the last few years. He just isn't the same guy. And to see him get knocked out like that, he would have never been knocked out like that 5 or 6 years ago. But as that same bald guy likes to say, Father Time catches us all, and this was the one where Father Time caught up to Deontay Wilder, and he lost to simply a better fighter. That's all it was. A better fighter, I guess, in this era. If this was 5 or 6 years ago, I think Wilder would have won this fight going away. I think it would have been super easy. But given where he is in his career now, this just wasn't the right matchup for him, and it just didn't. It didn't go according to plan, and it went. I think a little bit longer than how it should have gone, and it just was really. Not much I can really say here. I've said this countless times since the fight has been announced, and this is no disrespect to anybody over at Most Valuable Promotions. They've treated me well so far, but this fight doesn't need to happen. This fight shouldn't happen. This fight should get canceled for everybody's sanity. I don't think this fight should go ahead. I just think there's too many question marks. Mike Tyson is 30 years older. It's a fight that really nobody cares about other than the two names. Let's be honest. If this fight really does happen, we know who the rightful winner is going to be, and it's more than likely going to be Jake Paul because of his youthfulness, and so Jake Paul can brag to say that he fought Mike Tyson. This is all a money grab. I hope this doesn't happen. Tyson needs to worry about his health and safety first. And if I'm anybody in the Texas state regulatory board,
how did they let this fight, Zan? I'm sorry, but how did they let this fight be an actual professional legal bout and not an exhibition?
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. This is why we need a version of Andy Foster in every single commission, period. Because if Andy Foster was running Texas, this fight would have not. The speculations were, it looks like they were put to rest. Although, to me, it seemed like, and I'm sure you'd agree, that it seemed to me from pictures that came out that McGregor was sort of nursing either his calf or his ankle or something based on the picture that he posted at the Ankle Foot Institute wherever that picture was taken. So definitely a very wild 80 hours, but just to know that the fight is on, and just to know that that people are excited about it, to know that people I haven't heard from in a couple of years asking me if the Conor McGregor fight news is legit or not, probably means that that the casuals, and I use that term loosely, are going to come out in full force, and it'd be an exciting buildup, and I'm looking forward to June 29th. It's been the longest buildup to a single fight I felt in several years, so it'd be interesting. And again, I'm just very grateful that the fight is still happening, because I was worried there for a bit, because there was speculation like, oh, there's no way you can do Jamal Hill versus Carl Zolberg as the main event. We were talking about potential ideas, but you and I kind of agreed that the ideas that we were coming up with would just be too short notice. So to know that this fight is moving ahead as planned is super interesting, and just the stakes of this fight are massive. A loss for either or one of these guys, they more than likely have to go back to the drawing board. There could be a potential for retirement talk, whereas a win for either of these guys puts them in that title conversation. McGregor for at least 2 divisions, Chandler for potentially 2 divisions. So there's a lot at stake, and I'm very, very excited.
This just continues such a massive downfall, because you think about the weight miss, you think about the daily drinking and all the weird mind games, if you want to put it, or craziness, if you want to put it another way, Zan. But just everything that's happened with Ryan Garcia and the drug test failures, and it's just a sad downfall. I didn't think we would, you knew things could get bad based on what was going on, the fight hype with the Devin Haney fight, but this is just another degree.
Oh, this is another degree at plenty, and I think the biggest loser in this whole situation is Devin Haney, because he probably feels like he got cheated out of a win, right? Number one, and number two, you're seeing all of this negative backlash, from the Ryan Garcia side, when quite frankly, what you and I should be doing today when it comes to this particular topic is chronicling when the heck we're going to see the rematch. But instead we're talking about stuff that in boxing terms doesn't even fully matter outside of the ring. So the one thing I can say is I hope Ryan Garcia gets the support that he needs. I don't wish any ill will on him whatsoever. But if he keeps acting this way, he's going to continue to lose fans because, it's hard to keep up with someone when their ego gets in their own way. And to me, that's what I think Ryan Garcia is currently going through when he doesn't have the ego check from someone important to him or close to him that you should to tell him, hey, need to really pipe up, because if you don't fix yourself, it's only gonna hurt.
This means a couple of things. Number one, I still believe the Texas Commission is crazy making this a professional fight and not an exhibition, like we talked about. And number two, this means either there's something in the works at MSG where they're going to move that concert that's booked off November 9th to have UFC, 309 on November 9th? Or you're going to have a crazy packed weekend with Tyson Paul on the Friday and UFC 309 at the Garden on the Saturday, the 16th.
Well, any of those combinations I think are going to make people excited. That's for sure. And just really quick, now that we're on this topic, I just wanted to quickly read a statement from Mike Tyson in regards to the rescheduled date. This is coming from a press release from Most Valuable Promotions as of Friday, June 7th. We'll just really quickly here. Although we had to postpone the fight, I will resume my training shortly. I'm thankful to the medical staff that treated me and to MVP, Netflix, and AT&T Stadium for working diligently to find the best rescheduled date for all parties. While we have a new date, the result will be the same no matter when we fight. Jake Paul is getting knocked out on Friday, November 15th. This is in person at AT&T Stadium on Netflix, which seems to me like Mike Tyson is calling his shot. He wants to knock out Jake Paul, and he's telling the whole world that he will knock out Jake Paul. So there's your little inside the inbox PR release nugget, if you will, regarding the rescheduled dates. You're welcome. So there you go. What do you think? Do you think that this fight will end up moving forward as scheduled, or do you think we're going to be talking about another date change all over again? What do you think?
I think Netflix has too much invested in this fight, as do Tyson and Paul, that this fight can't happen. I feel like that's going to go on.
Okay, so I have to know from the horse's mouth: are you watching this fight, or are you refusing to watch it?
I will watch this fight.
I think it goes to show that once again, MMA to me is still the craziest sport in the world. You have March Madness for a couple weeks, but really, when you want to talk about the word madness in sports, there is nothing crazier in the combat sports world than what we had over the past 3 to 4 weeks. We had Conor McGregor initially taking on Michael Chandler. Then we had a postponed press conference. Then we had reports from various sources, including Ariel Helwani, that the fight seemed to be good and that they were trying to salvage it. And there were reports that the optimism was slowly but surely lowering itself. And then we get word due to essentially a week that Conor McGregor had the same injury that he did at UFC 264. If you want to talk about the madness of plenty that was the past 3 weeks, this was the definition of it. And to me, this is the biggest story in combat sports. And we're not even halfway through 2024. And I think when we look back on this year, when the year is over, when we look back on New Year's Eve going into 2025, I think we're going to look back and say that this was the craziest 2 to 3 week stretch that we've ever had. On the front of McGregor Chandler, obviously it's good to know that the fight's going to be rescheduled, but as you've alluded to several times, you don't know really when you should end the cycle or when you should keep it going. But at the very least, UFC 303 is still on. It's a fantastic main event. It's 2 fan favorite guys. It's for the light heavyweight championship, which has been a prestigious belt in Vegas around this summer time frame over the last several years. So it's only kind of fitting that the light heavyweight title and June are continuing to coexist. So overall, the UFC got what they wanted. Was it the original main event? No. But are hardcore MMA fans going to be happy? Absolutely.
Okay, you brought up a point from a term that I was looking for. So hardcore MMA fans are very happy. I mean, I love this idea of Alex Pereira and Jiří Procházka. I love the first fight between these two. I'm really excited for the second. I hope this time it goes longer than the 2 rounds that it did back at Madison.
Probably agree that the winner of Ortega Lopez is going to be fighting at the presumably named UFC 306 in September. They would have to, right?
Would they? Are you saying that as in they're just gonna have a fight, or are you saying the winner of this is gonna jump Holloway for a title shot?
No, I'm saying will they? I'm just saying, do you think that they'll compete on UFC 306? The winner.
I think the hope would be that the winner would be able to make the 2.5 month, at that point turnaround to fight at the Sphere. Like I said,
that was my point. Yeah.
Like I said, I just don't know against who, because I can't, after what Holloway did in April, I can't foresee anyone jumping him for a title shot, especially if they want to elevate Topuria to the level he could.
I don't think so either, but the bigger question is going to be, what do you do with Anthony Smith if he beats Carlos Ulberg? Because now the light heavyweight division would be in a conundrum. You know that, right?
Yeah, but Carlos Ulberg is still an up-and-comer. Jamal Hill is still... I mean, unless if Anthony Smith beats Ulberg, then you give him the Jamal Hill fight?
Make logical sense to me, because then that would be back-to-back wins. So, I don't know. But all I can say, though, is that, yeah, UFC 303, it has its switch-ups. These are 2 fascinating fights. What they had to do with Jamal Hill to get fluids out of his knee was very, very disgusting.
That was disgusting. I saw the tubes, and that was disgusting.
Yeah, I hope he's okay and he makes a speedy recovery, because he deserves it, number 1. But number 2, Carlos Ulberg, if he can win this fight, man, is he gonna ignite Australia, because that guy is very, very exciting. So that's a fight to blink about in the co-main event. Is just unbelievable styles.
Zen, if you're going to talk about somebody who has the biggest opportunity here, it's not Carlos Ulberg anymore. It's Diego Lopez. Imagine beating a former title challenger in Brian Ortega on such a short notice, especially if he gets. Unfortunately, Khamzat Chimaev is severely ill, as described by Dana White in the announcement video. He is in a hospital. An image actually came out of Khamzat on a hospital bed, tubes all around him. And basically he's really sick to the point. I mean, Zan, this reminds me of like peak COVID time, like 2021, where he was last really sick.
Yeah, he might have been in worse condition now than he was then, but you have a great point. So obviously this is tough. This was a highly anticipated fight, considering this is essentially a title eliminator. So now you lose half of that, and you get a guy, Nikram Alaskarov, which a lot of people don't know anything about. But given that this fight's on ABC, and given that he has the record that he does, if he can somehow beat Robert Whittaker in the middleweight division, all messed up.
Zan, just so you know, Robert Whittaker did an interview here with the New York Post. Okay. He had no idea who Ikram Alaskarov was.
He didn't know.
He didn't know. He didn't know until he got the call a couple hours after learning Khamzat was not going to fight. He had no idea who Ikram was.
No way.
He had no clue. He told Scott Fontana this.
No way.
I'm telling you, he had no idea.
Well, that's the business sometimes, and I don't know. We'll preview it in a little bit, but it could be one of those trap fights where no one knows who Alaskarov is, and he goes in and he shocks the world. You never.
And actually, there's another wrinkle to this story, Zan, that came out the day we're recording this. The original plan replacement main event was not going to be Ikram Alaskarov. It was going to be Bo Nickel. But unfortunately, Bo Nickel was in the mountains on some sort of hike or something. He had no reception, so he didn't get the call.
I know. I just don't understand how it makes any sense to go from Cody.
No, the UFC.
Robert Whittaker.
If Bo Nickel was in that cage, if he was in there with Whittaker, he would have been mauled.
Him be involved in so many huge fights, from Fury Usyk to Josh Ngannou fights, obviously with Deontay Wilder and other fights. I mean, you knew that this was inevitable. This guy has plans and has the guts, if you will, to make fights that nobody else was willing to make. And he's even, playing with the idea of Canelo versus Crawford for later this year. So you have to give him all the credit in the world. It's clear he wants to fix the sport. He wants to make the sport, he wants to get it into a place where it was, in the early part of the 20th century, the Roaring 20s era, where every fight was huge and every fight meant something and every fight was taking place in the stadium. I think he wants to get it back to that, and he wants the fighters to dictate their careers and rather the promoters. And even though I'm not a fan of what the Saudis are doing from a sports perspective, per se, I am a fan of what he's doing because he's trying to fix the blatant monotony that is the corruption of the sport. And you have to give him all the credit in the world because no other guy has gone out and said, this is the fight that has to happen. This is the fight that has to be made. You've seen all these promoters come out and say, oh, I'm trying to protect my guy. He has no favorites for anyone. He's even admitted it in several interviews. He doesn't care who wins or loses. He just wants to make the best fights possible, and you have to respect
feeling that payouts to suing UFC fighters too. I will just read for you the thread that Paul Gift, the two threads, I should say, that Paul Gift wrote on Twitter or X.
Are they relatively long or not really?
Probably not. Judge has serious concerns about UFC antitrust settlement, is not approving it today. They're meeting again in 2 weeks. Judge wants to see a fighter-by-fighter breakdown of money for Lee and Johnson fighters. Lee and Johnson referring to the main fighters at the source of the two different class action lawsuits against the UFC. The Kung Lee led lawsuit revolving around fighters who fought in the UFC between December of 2010 and June of 2017. And the Johnson lawsuit referring to fighters who fought in the UFC between July of 2017 and 2021. He's concerned, this is Paul Gift's continuing, Judge is concerned that the Lay fighters are only getting $161 million when he certified a case $800 million to $1.6 billion. As Paul Gift goes on to explain that basically, and actually Eric McAgren on social media, who's also great with the MMA law stuff, a lot better than we are, basically saying that the UFC wanted to settle both class action lawsuits at the same time, which led to March when TKO had that $300-something million settlement with all of the class actions suing UFC fighters. And that is playing basically a role here, is that the judge is concerned the payouts are too low when the certified case was between $800 million and $1.6 billion. All right, so we open quarter three's clips, and with, actually, as I mentioned before, us recapping UFC 303, talking about how Alex Pereira is a superstar, talking about how Diego Lopez and Dan Ige are warriors, and if Michael Chandler was just wasting his time with Conor McGregor.
Yeah, we talked about all that. We talked about all the theatrics and potential politics behind all that. And I remember we made some bold predictions as to what the second half of the year could look like, with a few of those actually coming true. But there were also a few of those that we least expected. So this was kind of the time when our focus, really did shift to some more exciting things. We had that UFC event in Manchester. We had the Dricus Duplessis fight against Israel Adesanya. Mm-hmm. And then we spent the bulk of our time, or at least most of it from what I recall, really speculating as to who was going to headline what would eventually become known as Noche UFC 2. That was a major point of contention at this point of the year. And then this was also when we had to deal with some unfortunate social media scrutiny regarding the Ultimate Fighter, which is a whole saga that you guys.
I refuse to put any of that in the best of. I refuse to put that in the best of. I'm not remembering that time.
Well, what I was just gonna. Now that you said that, I was gonna say it anyway. I was just gonna be like, if you guys don't know any of that, go back deep into the archives of Tough Enough for that. That was a very tumultuous time for both of us. So for your sake, I am grateful that you chose not to include any of that.
I am not, because I don't want to remember that. That was one of my lowest points of this year. We also we also had the beginnings of the UFC antitrust settlement. What was going on with that, and ultimately that ends up being denied. They have to go back to the table. You brought up Manchester. We also had, as part of this quarter, the Muhammad Mokaev situation, him getting not cut from the promotion after his bout at UFC 304, and even a PFL refusing to sign him, and ultimately he doesn't get signed by a major MMA promotion. He's still waiting for a UFC return.
Yeah, he's still waiting for a UFC return, and
I think he went back to Brave, right?
Yeah, he went back to Brave and he dominated his first fight back. Yeah, so he's back working his way up, and it's unfortunate because Brave would technically be considered a downgrade, even though it's a very well respected international promotion. But yeah, that was a whole saga in itself. And the whole fight was just a total disaster between he and Manel Kopp anyway. So it was definitely a weird holdover time for the UFC flyweight division, if you will.
I mean, I feel good for Kopp in his most recent performance. He needed a rebound in the way that he did in Tampa.
Right.
We also had more of this again, McGregor Chandler stuff, ultimately leading to a tease about McGregor Chandler possibly happening December until Dana puts the kibosh on that. And then Conor giving that little cryptic tweet of, "Oh, I want out of my contract," and then ultimately Chandler getting booked against Charles Oliveira. And Zan, quarter 3 was also the beginning of the glazing, if you know what I'm referring to.
Yes.
The constant references of Dana White considering Jon Jones the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, the greatest fighter of all time, getting GOAT and pound-for-pound essentially, considering both in one.
And still to this day, believing that. To this day.
Mm-hmm. So
shoot, you don't have the sound effect for it, but it's all right.
What?
To this day.
Oh, hold on. No, I do have the sound. I have not needed that sound effect in a long time. All right, hold on a minute. Yes, I do have that sound effect. Where are you? Where are you, Deontay?
To this day. To this day.
To this day.
There we go.
All right. So to this day, yes, he's still getting that stuff confused. And then this whole, and it's a start now, quarter 3, he hasn't fought Stipe yet, but we still have this on again, off again conversation about, is he going to end up fighting Tom Aspinall? And that stretches into Q4. We talk about Q4. Will he or won't he fight Tom Aspinall? So yeah. And to this day, hold on a minute.
To this day. To this day.
To this day, we still talk about him glazing Jon Jones.
And to this day, we still talk about him potentially fighting Tom Aspinall in what is being dubbed as the biggest fight in UFC history if it were to happen. So,
well, we'll talk about that in just a second, but for now, check out these Q3 clips.
What is your reaction to this tweet, Chandler's comments from over the weekend? Him meeting with thousands of fans who traveled to see he and Conor fight. They obviously didn't get it. What do you make of everything currently going on with this fight, which still doesn't have a date, a timetable, or really even legs, so to speak?
I mean, I'm glad that he's having interactions with fans, and I'm glad he's having all this talk with fans. And he's trying to keep busy, trying to do everything and fulfilling obligations. It was supposed to be his card. I know with Brett Okamoto, Okamoto kind of described it as basically he was walking into his own funeral because just everything that was going on, as screwed up as that is. But at the same time, I mean, how I feel like this fight, so let's imagine something, Zan. Let's imagine this fight. if it's true, it's not going to be August, September, October, and it's going to be December. Are we really going to have to wait that long just for this fight? I mean, going back to what I was talking about, we haven't seen Michael Chandler fight since his loss to Boye at 281 in Madison Square Garden. Like, is he really going to keep his career? I get it. It's Conor. I get it. It's a payday. Is he really going to keep his career off, for this long? Because think of all the fights and all the potential that he's kind of wasted chasing Conor.
Yeah, I understand your side of it, but I think obviously I'm not
blaming him for chasing Conor. I understand why he's doing it. It's just, if he loses this fight after chasing all this time, then all we're going to think of is what could have been.
I'm just going to put it to you point blank. Alex Pereira is one of the biggest stars that the UFC has ever had in the modern era. I think I feel very comfortable saying that.
I think, Zan, just a simple fact that you kind of mentioned, because you were at a Buffalo Wild Wings, you were watching this card with multiple TVs. You said that you saw on the ESPN network feed the entrances and the stare down and everything.
They showed the whole thing. It was unreal. It was unreal. I could not believe it when I was watching that the linear ESPN of places, the non-pay-per-view version, was showing everything leading up to the fight. The fight literally starting minutes later. It was insane.
Yeah. And just the simple fact of that. Plus, just like 300, they aired the Alex Pereira knockout. Like, they put it on the social media feeds. They put it on the UFC YouTube. It was Diego Lopez up out of his sleep, basically all for nothing, just to rehydrate for him to make the 155. And then it becomes really all for nothing because Ortega gets a 103-degree fever. He's out. Dan Ige is in Vegas. They have his medicals in Las Vegas because he fought in Las Vegas in February.
And he trains there too.
He trains there, lives there. He was also going to fight on July 20th. And he's basically raises his hand, and somehow, I can't believe this, the commission allowed it to happen.
At a catch weight, nonetheless.
165 pounds. So Lopez had to, rehydrate again and weigh in again.
On 5 hours' notice. Unreal.
Oh, my God. The fact that this whole pay-per-view was a roller coaster going up to there, and it still was a roller coaster the day of the event. Like, you want to talk about just the luck of this card. This was what this card all summed up was.
Yeah, you want to talk about the bottom lettering of a ticket saying subject to change, and then some. Because I'm not joking. When this news broke, and I texted a buddy that Brian Ortega wasn't fighting anymore. He goes, "Zan, are you pranking me? WTF? What are you talking about?"
I'm texting you all caps, screaming about all this.
Was I the one to break it to you that the fight was off?
No, but I'm in the middle of since we MMA news, we have a little Slack chat, and when someone points it out, the tweeting that's going out with Eric Nissick and Ali and Dan himself, I'm like, we're all like, what the hell is going on? Given all that he's done, all the short notice stuff, all the fact that he's dominated 2 disciplines and 2 weight classes in 2 disciplines, I go Alex Pereira. I think with what he's done, and especially with the exclamation mark that was 303, I think he's jumped both of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far just yet. I mean, I still somewhat agree with Dana when he says that there are other challengers at light heavyweight that he could still fight. There is the heavyweight.
Okay, but then why not use that same argument with his?
Hang on. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna try to break this down in the best way that I can. The reason why I think Islam Makhachev is at this very moment the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world is a twofold reason. Number one, he beat the consensus greatest 145er of all time. You could say the first fight was controversial. It counts as a win. He viciously knocked out Alexander Volkanovski. He dominated Dustin Poirier, the best uncrowned champ that arguably lightweight has ever seen. Alex
It's fair.
Pereira, hang on, I'm almost, and I promise. Last I checked, Alex Pereira is 1-1 in MMA against Israel Adesanya. Last I checked, Jon Jones' last opponent, which took him 3 years to move to heavyweight. I give him all the credit in the world. That's a big move. His
Cyril Gane. Yeah,
his
I know.
lone win, Cyril Gane, is 2-2 in his last 4. What does that tell you? Cyril Gane at that particular point in time in my
I actually understand your argument.
Hang on. I'm almost finished. Cyril Gane at that particular point in time, the UFC can make you believe whatever you want. Cyril Gane at that moment in time was not the best heavyweight in the world, and everybody knows
So back
that.
in March, the TKO, who is now the parent company of the UFC and WWE, gave out $335 million to the class action suing fighters. We talked about how it would only be about 3,000 or so for each of the fighters involved. Now, if I remember there was somebody from Forbes, Paul Gift, who, when he tweeted out the original concerns about Judge Boulware, mentioned the class action lawsuit was going to, the amount of damages that they were looking for was going to be upwards to $1.6 billion. So $335 million versus $1.6 billion is a significant difference. And I think he does have a point when he mentions, talk about all the injunctive relief and freedom for fighters. And it seems like that's clashing with, with the Kung Lee portion of this case. Although Paul Gift did seem to insinuate when he made his tweets a couple of weeks ago, the TKO people wanted to settle, both at the same time. So all I can say is it doesn't look good. And in my opinion, I think this one's going to head to jury trial. I wasn't going to believe, if you asked me 2 years ago, I would tell you you're crazy. Now I think it's going to a jury trial.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. They've dragged this on so long, and now more evidence is coming out and more concerns from the fighters, according to what we just listened to and the threads that you read. It's very clear that the fighters feel that they're not getting what they deserve, and they will go to every extra measure that they can to get this to trial. And you have to remember, this is 10 years in the making. So this is one of the biggest stories, not just in MMA, but potentially sports, depending on how this trial shakes out. And I guess another thing that several MMA media members that maybe have been on the outside looking in have said is that if you're not covering this story in any respect as an MMA journalist, you aren't doing your job correctly. So we're trying to do our due diligence on that.
I wrote a whole thing for MMA News trying to lay out everything that at this point, like I said, it's now or never. And you know what? At this point, like I said last episode, let's throw a WWE style stipulation in here.
Okay.
I think loser must retire at this point.
1,000%.
Because if you're Michael Chandler and you lose to Conor McGregor, who hasn't had a meaningful win since 2016 and hasn't fought in 3 years, and and you've wasted all this time when you could have had a potential title shot. I know we had a comment recently on our Facebook page about, Michael Chandler doesn't have a great record and such, but it's not like he's losing to bad people. He's lost to Charles Oliveira. He's lost to Justin Gaethje. It's not like he's losing to scrubs.
But and his last fight was against Dustin. His last loss was to, and his last fight
Poirier.
Yeah.
So that's just a bad comment. I understand it from the perspective of maybe you can argue, he'll never get the title. But I'll just say, if he loses to Conor McGregor, then he's never getting the title. And at that point, his options will be change weight classes or hang it up for good.
Right.
So, and then if you're Conor
McGregor, and a win for Conor McGregor opens up potentially 3 different doors in 3 weight classes: featherweight, lightweight, and welterweight, which is sickening to say, considering how inactive he is. But it's true. It's so disappointing.
But on the other end, if you're Conor McGregor, at that point, it goes to something we talked about long ago. I think last year, you'll have 1 fight left on your UFC contract. Do something like a Conor Nate or a Conor Nate 3 or a Conor Masvidal or something, and then that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Which, by the way, I think the only fight is the last fight on his deal should be Conor Nate 3. That's the only fight that makes logical sense.
Talk about the other Diaz brother, because unfortunately, he was supposed to be a co-main event in Abu Dhabi against Vicente Luque. That fight's not happening. Travel issues, they said on the UFC Vegas broadcast. It's just travel issues. It's not the fact. Well, I guess travel issues translate to, we're talking about Nick Diaz, who likes to, do a little bit of this every now and again. Which, by the way, in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, we have rules against cannabis that could get him thrown in prison. How did nobody realize this?
I don't know. But Tom, to be honest, who really wanted to see Nick Diaz versus Vicente Luque anyway?
Honestly, I completely forgot Nick Diaz was going to fight again.
Jeez, man. I don't know.
Magomedov, though, and Michael Oleksandr, shout out to them stepping up, both of them stepping up on short notice to do this co-main event.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, who doesn't want to see Charlotte Bullet fight? And I knew, by the way, I don't know if you saw it, but Charlotte Bullet posted a picture with Hunter Campbell about a week ago. You knew a fight announcement was coming. I just didn't know it would be coming this quickly.
We didn't realize the true nature of it. But of course, Hunter Campbell strikes again with his magic. All the security needed for that fight and fight's entrance.
Even before the fight.
That's what we got from Mokaev and Kopp. That was it.
Did you think after the near fight before the fight that somebody was going to get finished in 40 seconds?
Yes. And then they both did nothing but feints for the first round.
I know.
Look, the fight was crap. There's no doubt about it. The fight was terrible. Mokaev clearly won, but the fight itself was terrible. And the thing is, and I'm already going to preface this before we get into the conversation about Dana's comments at the post-fight and him not getting a contract like that. He knew coming in, he said he knew that he needed to put on an exciting performance in order to get a title shot. So why did he come out and fight like that? Do I think Muhammad Mokaev being cut was harsh? A little bit, considering he's basically a top 5 contender. He basically has had finishes. He's beaten Tim Elliott. He's beat Manel Kopp here. He's gotten finishes in this division. He's definitely somebody who was close to the top and could have had a title shot next. So obviously not after performance here, but he was basically on the doorstep. And, Ben the Bane Davis pointed out in his video, Conor McGregor and his pre-fight antics and how they used some of that crap to build up to the Khabib fight. Jorge Masvidal, the three-piece in a soda that he had to Leon Edwards.
Yeah, but I think the difference with those guys is those guys had personality. Mokaev,
that's hypocritical.
You weren't really sure.
But it's hypocritical.
No, I don't disagree. Especially when you're trying to build up the UAE region, that's a bad
boy. Brett Cagle from Bunger's Chance actually asked Ray Steffo at the PFL press conference about, did the PFL have any interest in signing Mokaev? To which Steffo said, "No, I've heard from people, and no, he is, in Steffo's own words, a pain in the ass to deal with, and they had no interest." And Mokaev weirdly tweets at him and says, "Yeah, I wasn't going to take your offer anyway," which has actually sparked some people to say, "Wait a minute, if you're saying that, your team was saying that there was no contact between you guys, and you're making a statement like that." Kind of implies that maybe you were lying a little bit, and that
there might have been some contact. Yeah, exactly. But one thing I will say is Ray Steffo. I really wish it was Don Davis at that press conference because Ray Steffo. No, because Ray Steffo is a coach at Extreme Couture. Manel Kopp trains at Extreme Couture and just fought Mokaev. They've had all that back and forth before the fight. It seems like they were all right after, but before the fight, it was very
right. The sucker punch, the 2 altercations.
So you're asking a guy who coaches at the gym Mokaev trains at, Cop trains at, if he's gonna like sign Mokaev, it's like, if you talk to Don Davis though, it might have been a little bit of a different situation.
That has been overseeing this, Richard Boulware from the one of the district courts of Nevada. He is rejected for a number of reasons, primarily because number one, the settlement number $335 million is completely different from that. They could have gone, the fighters could have gone upwards of 1.5 or 1.6 billion dollars for this case, and if this were to go to jury trial and the UFC was found liable, it would be triple damages. So the fighters could have gone upwards to $4.5 billion. So there was that. And there was this idea that, and Josh Gross kind of talked about it, that the TKO wanted to settle, or the UFC, if you want to say that for simpler terms, wanted to settle both cases at once. So that's where the $335 million comes in. And Judge Boulware felt that could basically be double jeopardy for those in the Cage and Johnson case, because the fighters in the Kung Lee case were talking about money and basically accusing the UFC of illegal monopoly practices. The ones in the Cage and Johnson case wanted not just money, but contractual changes. So Judge Boulware felt that the contractual changes the UFC was giving up on top of just $335 million compared to $1.5 billion, felt like those in the more modern antitrust case would basically lose on both ends.
The UFC Apex fight, empty arena, fight night, whatever you want to call them, has been a pretty bad draft. I mean, it has resulted in a couple of those, cards and where we think it's going to be sucky bad, and then it ends up being fantastic and entertaining.
And they're really good.
And then you have cards like
right, exactly.
And then you have cards like last weekend.
Snooze fest.
Which I want. I want the Men in Black tools and the white. I want to forget that card ever happened.
I already have. I already have.
Zan, I'm already looking at that August 24th card, and like I said on Tough Enough, outside of those two Tough Finale fights, I already want to forget that card ever happened.
Oh, 100%, man. Yeah, I mean, my quick thoughts on the renovations are this. It's nice to see that the UFC is actually putting some investment time in the UFC Apex, and I know that might sound like an unpopular opinion, but if you mean to tell me that they're doing a $25 million renovation, that can only mean one thing. That's going to mean that more fans at a much higher price are going to be allowed to attend the shows, which means it's going to be 10 times more impossible to go.
Which means Apex cards forever, starting summer 2025.
Absolutely.
But that is going to in a minute. This is going to force them on the road more now.
For sure, which means they'll be coming to territories they probably haven't been to in a long time. So hopefully
what's going to happen now, there's going to be, I think, a couple more fight night cards outside of the one I mentioned on the 9th. So what's going to happen there? What's going to happen to fight night cards in 2025?
Dana did confirm on McAfee earlier this week that Edmonton and China are part of the plans for Q4 of 2024.
The report I said before, it's actually Cole Shelton. Cole said Tampa's going to get its card December 14th. It's going to be the last card of the Dana White's comments following week 1 of Dana White Contender Series. He basically claimed that Conor McGregor will not fight this year. And I let out what I needed to let out. Conor puts out a tweet and says, tell him, everybody, we need to get everybody on social media. We need to flood Dana's social media and say, we want December. All caps, being Conor as he normally is. And Conor and Chandler keep posting all these updates across social media in the days since. Conor saying, the UFC wants me for December. Chandler saying, hey, Chandler, I don't know. I know Nick Morgeson, my co-host on ETV Sports, had met him at the Fanatics Fest in New York on, I think it was Friday. He said he did ask him about Conor. I don't know if he ever gave a clear answer, but it seems like Chandler, this whole time, he still wants Conor.
I think he kept it very simple when he spoke to Nick. He goes, I just want to fight. I'm ready to fight. That was his answer.
Okay. then guess you want. I'll be blunt. We're not even 5 minutes into our recordings, and I'll be blunt. If he wants to fight right away, he has to move off Conor. Commonly associated Conor McGregor and Las Vegas hand in hand, going together like peanut butter and jelly. We have rarely seen Conor McGregor fight outside of Las Vegas, even after the whole thing happened with Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Conor was so pissed and tweeted that he would never fight in Las Vegas ever again. Then, ever since then, the only time he has not fought in Las Vegas was when the UFC had to do Fight Island because of COVID. We were in the middle of the pandemic era of fights. Right. So I really don't know what to make of all of this because, like I mentioned last week, Sam, when we did our mini-so, the fact that you've got 2 title fights now potentially being targeted for UFC 310, be it Bilal Muhammad defending the welterweight championship, and whatever's going on with this lightweight title situation with Arman Tsarukyan, an injured Islam Makhachev, if an interim title is going to be inserted here with Dan Hooker and company. I mean, the fact that they're looking at 2 potential title fights for December, whether it be one of the 2 or both, tells me McGregor ain't fighting in December. But are you really, I guess, Zan, are you really going to put this off another month? After all of the headaches, after all of the frustration trying to get this fight off the ground one way or another, be it all the stuff with Tough and all the negotiating, the pullout, weeks before, like, are we really going to continue on with this? Why? I get why, but I get why.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels that way. And to piggyback off of what you just said, I just don't understand. Like I get it. It would be a banner start to the 2025 UFC calendar.
That's my only thing. I guess it has 2020, the second half of their 2024 calendar. Has it just been such a what show since the McGregor Chandler canceling, or you could even say after UFC 300 and say more than just the second half, that at this point they would rather just focus on getting 2025 off to a hot
things
start.
That Dana said that are absolutely justified, okay? But okay. let me debunk Dana a little bit too. When he said that Islam Makhachev beat Alexander Volkanovski in a fight that a lot of people thought that Volk won, including myself, what Dana fails to mention, because it's technically something that would go against his argument, is that Islam eventually finished Alexander Volkanovski the next time they fought.
Does the short notice nature of that second fight have anything to? Does that?
I don't think so because they still fought. Volk could have not. Volk just said no. I'm not going to be ready. I'm not going to be ready in 14 days. You could easily. He said that they could have moved on. My point in saying this is to me, you can't justify the word activity when someone was supposed to fight and got injured. That to me, injuries mean inactivity. Now, activity, and I think that's something that Kevin was trying to push back on him very, very, very much about. But I do think there are aspects of Dana's argument that to me are just simply flawed. Another thing I'd like to add to this too is when Dana mentioned the point how, am I just going to leave Stipe high and dry and go tell him to F off or whatever? Think about all the other times where the UFC had a rematch or a big fight right in their grasp, and they didn't do it for some stupid reason. You know it better than anyone. But now in this case, in this scenario, because it's this quote unquote legacy fight between 2 guys who barely fight now. Well, let's be honest. This is no disrespect to Jon Jones at all, but he barely fights now. And Stipe Miocic's last win was 4 years ago. How can you justify, to me, outside of maybe 10% of the MMA community, how can you justify to me that this is the fight that needs to be made at this point in time when you're active interim champion who just recently turned 31, 32 years old is sitting on the shelf for no reason? Reaction to this is a perfect fight for Charles Oliveira, just considering that he just lost to Arman Tsarukyan and he was promised a rematch with Islam Makhachev, which he never got. So this is a huge fight where it's almost a must-win winning your in scenario for Charles Oliveira, because he'll more than likely fight the winner of Arzuki and then Makachev next. So to me, all the pressure, on my opinion, is on Oliveira, and it seems like to me Chandler has nothing to lose, considering that he sat out to try to get as much money as he could for this Conor fight. This Conor fight's not happening. So now, in my opinion, Chandler is the one that has nothing to lose. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, honestly, I could see that, because with a loss, I mean, Zain, how many times do we talk about Conor McGregor having not had a meaningful win in the UFC since his lightweight title in November of 2016?
Right.
Are we up to 11 billion times we've talked about that?
Yeah, and I think it's reiterated in every single article on every single MMA outlet about Conor McGregor, because there's nothing else to say about it, because he doesn't do anything. That's why.
Right.
So you have to go back and reference things that happened 8 years ago, because that's all you have to go off. So
for sure. And the other thing is that if somehow Michael Chandler wins, and while it seems a little far-fetched because it's been a while since Chandler has fought, it's going to be 2 years nearly to the date that he last fought, when he fought Dustin Poirier at the Garden. Like I mentioned, Michael Chandler nearly got a knockout in the first round of that fight with Charles Oliveira. Had he had a little more time in that opening round, he might have gotten the finish and might have won the UFC lightweight championship. And if Michael Chandler defeats Charles Oliveira in this fight, especially if it comes via a finish, then all of a sudden Michael Chandler has now opened up the door, and he's a top contender at lightweight all of a sudden. So at that point, maybe you go for the championship instead of the Conor fight. So there's a lot at this point. Michael Chandler has not much to lose.
What I think is even more disappointing is, with every single semi-announcement, it gets the fans' hopes up, and then days later, the fans' hopes are dead. And then the same cycle happens over and over and over and over again.
The circle of MMA life.
You're almost convincing me to not believe in it anymore, honestly.
Yeah, that's
which I can't believe I'm finally coming to my senses. But I might be coming to my senses.
Hey, you're finally joining my side. Zain, you can never be let down if you don't have any hope at all.
That's true.
That's such a pessimistic way of looking at life, but guess what? That's the same man who is glazing over Jon Jones says it's going to happen. That Jones's comments that we talked about last week about retiring at MSG, not true. He will fight Tom Aspinall before retiring. So
what do you think?
It's Dana White. Do you think I believe a word that comes out of his mouth regarding Jon Jones right now?
No.
Good.
It's honestly a bummer that this fight was pulled, just considering that, when the UFC goes to Utah, at least the last couple of years, they try to bring the best card that they can. So this is a massive blow to it. But again, kind of like what we said earlier, a downgrade for UFC 307, a potential upgrade for UFC 310 if they can rebook the fight for Vegas. So I think in any event, everybody wins, because Utah, you're still going to get a pretty solid card. It's with some decent fights in the card, a decent main event, obviously, with Pereira and Roundtree. You've got Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Joaquin Buckley. You've got other fights on the card to fulfill the appetite.
All right, to the final part of 2024. The Conor McGregor stuff finally goes to a head. Jon Jones, more PFL stuff, more settlement stuff. So actually, let's start with the Jon Jones. Because we talked about the end of our talk and then the end of the Q3 clips. We have all this talk about, what's after Stipe with a win? Is Jon Jones going to retire? Is he going to try to go after Pereira? Is he going to try to go after Aspinall? And I mean, as of this point, one of the clips that we're talking about Q4, Zain, is the early negotiations that are going on with Jon Jones. And as of the time we're recording this, you put it on the record, John Anik has put it on the record, that potentially that could be the International Fight Week fight, Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall.
Yeah, which I think would be the most ideal scenario, because when was the last time? I mean, this is no disrespect to last year's International Fight Week or even the International Fight Week in 2023.
Are you going to
but-
talk about the last time Jon Jones headlined IFW?
Well, that and just the sense too. When was the last time International Fight Week really felt huge? You'd probably have to go back to when he and or McGregor headlined
Probably
it last. So,
see, that's the thing. I was gonna say McGregor Poirier 3, but that was COVID. I mean, that was still
Right.
post-COVID. That wasn't International Fight Week. That was September.
right, that was the fake IFW because that's where I technically he went to the fake one because they moved it to September.
Right.
That's right. That was with
So
that whole mess with UFC 266. Yeah, that's right.
So then if we're going strict traditional means, then yeah, probably the big Jones Aspinall would be the biggest since Jon Jones fought in 2019 International Fight Week.
Right.
So it's been a while. Having said that, I mean, you're right. It's probably ideal, especially because we have no idea what's going on with McGregor. We'll talk about him in a second, but the settlement. So back to the TKO settlement. So ultimately Q4, one part of it is approved, the settlement involving the Kung Lee-based fighters from the first antitrust suit. As of the time we're recording this, the second antitrust suit involving Caden Johnson, still unsettled. We're going to see how that plays out in 2025. More comments from you, well, you and Pat, but mainly you, about the PFL and how they've been handling the Bellator, which ultimately is coming to a head at this point, and we'll see what happens with Bellator in 2025. I'll just note that if you guys look at the branding for, what was being promoted as the Road to Dubai, there's no Bellator branding on there anymore, other than the Bellator lightweight title.
Yeah, and it seems like some fellow insiders that you and I know pretty well. There's inklings. Nothing is officially, but there seems to be inklings that the Bellator brand is going away forever. So that it also is a relative question mark going into 2025 in terms of that whole situation.
Yeah, kind of a shame. Conor McGregor, of course. Remember, this actually quarter started with a tease that he was shifting focus over to Dan Hooker, but nothing has come to fruition on that.
No,
and then
that was all smoke and mirrors, and then it was the story of all stories, which I'll let you continue with that.
And then the headline that's kind of taken up in the last couple of months of 2024, Conor McGregor being found civilly liable of sexual assault in Ireland. A jury of his peers finding him essentially guilty of sexually assaulting a woman in 2018. Obviously, McGregor has had numerous numerous allegations of similar circumstances before, but this is one where he is actually being found with a guilty verdict. As a result, you have several sponsors dropping him, especially the biggest of them all, Proper 12. He had sold off his ownership stake, but still he was a face of the brand. It was the company that he founded dropping him. So
they dropped him. There were boxing gyms in Ireland that took down murals of him. I mean,
the video game.
Yeah, the Hitman and video game. I mean, I guess I'm old enough to say that he's on my wall. He might not be on my wall for too much longer, depending on what else happens. It's a very, very dark time if you have any association with Conor McGregor at all, whether you're a fan or just a media member that's covered him for years. So,
it's a shame. Dana gave no comment on the verdict. Basically for us, Zan, I had to do what I did for ETV Sports, and it's like all the clips from the final episode of the year I had to put in just because of their relevancy, which includes Dana giving no comment, which, my opinion, I understand people's outrage because he is technically one of the best, most popular fighters of the UFC, but he hasn't fought since 2021. So
I'm just gonna say here right now, and I know that this is a best of, and technically there shouldn't be anything new here, but I'm just gonna say going into 2025 at this point in their trajectory and in how much they have going for them right now, just holistically as a business, at this particular moment in time, I personally do not think that they need him personally at the moment.
I agree. And
They don't
again,
need him.
and again, Dana is right. Like, people need to hold on and just listen to me. He is right in that he doesn't have to make a comment, because not that he shouldn't, because obviously the connection, but then again, considering why Conor wants to fight so we can get out of the contract, the UFC would be stupid to let that happen. So they can just sit back. They don't need to do anything.
Nope.
In Nick Morgan's own words, they've got him hostage.
Yep.
They don't have to do anything with him. They can just hold on to him and he doesn't fight ever again. And honestly, and I've said it before, part of why I said no with this McGregor Chandler stuff, he doesn't need it. He doesn't need to fight anymore.
Nope.
Unless he's going to lose a bunch of money from this, but I really just don't see that.
I don't see that either, considering how much he's currently worth. I think he'll be just fine.
And then just so, usually if there are clips from multiple clips from an episode, Zan, I try to do in the order of the episode. But the last episode, I had to make an exception. Because just when we were done recording, and just when we thought we were done with this McGregor Chandler saga, that damn Conor tweet went out.
Yeah, so the candle, I guess, flickered again. Just for very brief context, we were literally done recording. Then all of a sudden we open our phones and our phones start going off. And sure enough, the first thing we see is a series of McGregor Chandler quote tweets between one another. So we quickly reacted to that, put in a little teaser with a little kind of like a remix, old school wipe, if you will. And we covered the inevitable now deleted tweets that appeared between those two, and apparently they're like an odd couple. They can't get rid of each other. So
no, absolutely not. So in my own words, you know what? In my own words, what I thought was going to end in 2024, yeah, it's not over yet. So go watch these clips.
Women's 135 isn't in the best place right now. Maybe Kayla Harrison can change it. Maybe a Nunes comes back, but it's clear that weight class needs severe help, for sure.
Yeah, severe help in the worst way. Very well said. Just wanted to quickly comment on what you just said about Amanda Nunes. I understand it's 1-1. I understand as in pure mathematical sense. It's just literally looking at the numbers straight up that the trilogy makes numerical sense. I get it because it's 1-1. But if you look at the sheer domination that Nunes put on her in fight 2, I don't think it warrants the third fight. What I think was a real stinker in this whole thing was the UFC was smart. They had a prime setup to where it was a side-by-side screen and Kayla Harrison was on the other side. You had the moment to make the call out to start the whole promo production, and you blew it. Crawford is one of the few guys who can actually lay claim to that. And even though Conor McGregor is a big deal money-wise, I think he's more worried about running the risk of getting seriously injured than, actually really fully focusing on his current career at hand, which is being one of the best boxers on the planet. What did you think of him turning down an offer to box and fight Conor McGregor in a 2-fight series as part of Riyadh season? And do you think he made the right decision in doing so? What do you think?
Well, I think it would have been absolutely sick. I think it would have been so fun if it actually happened, like Crawford versus McGregor in MMA and boxing. That would have been so cool. Come on, we've never really had anything like that. I know we've had, Conor Mayweather and everything, but we didn't have it in MMA.
I raved and ranted. I said,
Right.
I'm not believing a word that comes out of Conor McGregor's mouth. And yet here we are again, just this never-ending cycle. Obviously, Zan, we've talked about previously, and I've mentioned in articles I produced for MMA News related to this. Conor has 2 fights left on his UFC deal. He says he wants to fight twice in 2025. He basically has given us the hint he wants out of his UFC contract. We know, I think we're smart enough to know, the UFC don't want him out of the contract. They want him locked up. Your thoughts here?
Well, I just think this is ridiculous and a little bit disrespectful to Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker should be waiting around to see what happens with the lightweight title picture next. He shouldn't be You're worried about what's going on with a guy that hasn't fought in a professional MMA fight since I was physically present in July of 2021. Is it a big fight for international MMA? Is it a big fight for Australia? Would the whole country come out to see it? Yes, but at this point in Conor McGregor's career and at this point in Dan Hooker's career, is it really the fight that Hooker deserves? Given who he's beaten in his last couple opponents, and given how he looked in August in Perth in his last fight, I don't understand that this is my issue with this is I don't understand that this is a step up in competition for him.
I'll say here's what I'm gonna say, Zed. It's not. It's definitely not. And I definitely, I have advocated that Dan Hooker now has a sign, depending on what goes on with the lightweight picture, depending on what goes on with Islam's injury, what could happen next at the lightweight title scene. At the same time, I don't think Dan Hooker gets this fight if he loses to Mateusz Gamrot in August.
I don't think so either.
So if Hooker's getting the opportunity for, as Conor likes to say, red panty night, are you going to blame him for chasing after? Because then, honestly, my feelings about what I was going in the prediction for a Chandler fight. I said Chandler first round knockout. I think Hooker is more than capable of knocking Conor out in the first fight. I don't know if I'm going to cry robbery like everybody else. I do think that I agreed with everybody else that I thought Bivol won the fight. But, I think a draw, like that one judge had it a draw, I don't think I'm pretty mad at a draw. I think that would have been...
From the highlights I saw, I think I would have scored a draw.
I think a draw would have been fine. 7-5 either way would have been fine. I had it 7-5 Bivol. I don't know necessarily where you get the 8-4. Who that judge with the 116, 112, that outcry I completely get.
Yeah, Eddie Hearn was pissed about that. It was more than obvious.
Yeah. Obviously he was going to be pissed because his guy lost, but
he would have liked to see, he said in that interview, he'd like to see Beterbiev grant Bivol a rematch. And I think if that's what Saudi Arabia wants, I think that's what they're going to end up getting.
But of course, the politics of boxing, the WBA is now going to come up with a mandatory challenger.
Because of course they will.
Hold on. There you go.
As usual. The same thing, even though we don't have it as a banner, the same thing can be said for Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach. No one would have anticipated Lamont Roach getting a title shot against Gervonta Davis after what he did to Frank Martin. It's the same cycle over and over again.
Yeah. And, Turkai can try and do whatever he can, and I know he's done some good with the sport, but the politics are still there, unfortunately.
Which is why I think Dana's refusing to answer any boxing questions at this point, because I think he's starting to reconsider again for the third time. I think he's walking back his comments about if he's really getting into it or not. That's my theory.
You hear Zuffa Boxing's music, it's about to make a big entrance, and then it just retreats back.
You never know.
I mean, I would like to see a rematch. I did think Bivol was the one that should have come out on top, but obviously there were a lot of circumstances pointing to Beterbiev, and honestly, Beterbiev was landing the more powerful shots. He had the more powerful moments in the fight. We can't say at this point that Francis fumbled the bag because he got 2 boxing fights, nearly beat the WBC heavyweight champion, got paid very well for both fights, got paid pretty damn well for his PFL pay-per-view fight, became the PFL Super Fights champion in the process of doing so. He's the chairman of PFL Africa. I mean, he did not fumble this bag at all. I understand Dana White's frustrations, but at the same time, it feels like, Zan, coming off of that emotional, victory that he had and the story of Francis Ngannou, it feels kind of messed up that he's saying this stuff now.
I don't disagree, and I actually will take it a step further and say I think Dana's message was more a direction toward Francis's management than Francis himself.
I think so, because he's talked about Dana in the past having a problem with Francis's management, did he not?
Yeah, yes, he has on several occasions.
Francis made so much more money, with 2 boxing fights and a PFL fight, a PFL contract rather, considering he's also a chairman of sorts there, than he would have made fighting Jon Jones under the normal UFC contract.
Right. Then Francis came out afterward and said that he's made 5 times more money than he ever made in the UFC.
So regardless of what you think about the PFL and the pay-per-view purchases or the contract, I mean, Francis made, or the fact that we'll never see Jones and Ngannou, Francis made the right business decision.
And it's kind of related to the same thing.
Right, because we talked about Francis Ngannou and the amount of money that he's made outside the UFC versus with the UFC.
And he said, he's like, when have you ever heard a story of where we owe guys any money?
Well, now you do. You owe $375 million to all your fighters between 2011 and 2016.
Right.
But again, this is only for the first lawsuit. So obviously you had the whole thing with Judge Boulware rejecting the initial settlement and everything that happened.
And they're still pissed about that. You know that.
Right. And here's so we saw all that happen. Even Dana saying, well, I went to high school with this guy. So basically saying it was a personal. We also need to wait and see how this $375 million is going to be paid out to the fighters.
Right. And I think, to put it simply, the, without getting too emotional over it, I guess, some of the testimonies from some of these fighters, some notable former names, if I might add, are pretty disturbing, to say the least. And I got to say, to hear Dana say what he said about Shane Carwin, just to not sugarcoat it, was a very tone deaf answer, in my opinion. That was quite alarming, and I'm sure you probably felt similarly.
Yeah, because Shane Carwin, I mean, at one point, Stan, was one of the most talked about fighters in the world. And to see what's happened to him in the years since has been downright sad and in some ways disturbing.
Same can be said for Jessica Ai as well. That's even worse. I mean, for some of these fighters to say that they can't even finish the literal degree that they started because of this is really disappointing.
Especially, Zan, when you mentioned Ai, when we talk about all the damage that these fighters suffered, I still can't get when Jessica Ai's name is mentioned, the Valentina Shevchenko head kick knockout out of my head. I don't know if a long layoff like Stipe Miocic has had is going to do him any solid favors in that department.
No, I certainly don't think so either. Number one and number two, I think what makes the situation even worse is, you want to talk about inactivity, you want to talk about all that stuff. You could say that Jon Jones is inactive or has been inactive, but now you can spin the whole narrative back on Stipe because Jones beat a guy in Cyril Gane who was one of the best contenders in the division. To whereas every single guy that Stipe Miocic has beat so far in the UFC is no longer with the promotions. But that's another wrinkle that I think some people are failing to forget. Is it's not like Stipe decided, I'm going to sit on the sidelines for a year and see how the division plays out. He sat on the sidelines now for over 3.5 years. So I think just looking at the situation that he's walking into, he's walking into a UFC that was very different, just holistically, not just as a promotion, but MMA is a sport in general than it was when he was champion. So I think there are more interesting layers surrounding this fight than what people realize, because you can't just look at it stylistically. 42-year-old Stipe was different than he was 37. It's less when when Jon Jones was 25 and beginning his UFC light heavyweight title run. You can't look at these guys the same way that you may have 4 years ago. So when people say, this fight's an easy fight to pick, Stipe's, whatever, I don't think I'm on the side of, I don't think you take 3 years off and you come back looking like the same fighter. There's no way. I mean, you got Stipe coming out in interviews, admitting that he's still working his ass off. Quite
it was
frankly.
really crazy to see Jon Jones fight in person. He really is a crazy talent. Like that trip in the first round that he got Stipe down with was just so quick. Like it's a lot of his strikes are just, you can tell it's thrown with just a lot of IQ and just such good technique. He just throws with such good technique, really. Like it is crazy. And like it was cool to see, especially when he rocks Stipe. When he you don't get to see Jon Jones rock someone on the feet with his hands a lot, So getting to see him use his boxing when he rocks Stipe on the feet, like seeing him land those punches and like really sit down in the pocket, like that was really fun. You don't get to see that from Jon Jones a lot.
And we were talking before we started recording about just the way you saw Jones's striking up close and personal. You mentioned all the power that he was bringing. And I made mention of something that my dad said when he was sitting there next. Jon Jones, was always known for those leg kicks, those oblique kicks that he would throw. He hasn't thrown that as a heavyweight yet in the 2 fights he's had now. Imagine if he starts to implement those again. I mean, the way that he looks. We saw him delivering some powerful, some rocking shots at a light heavyweight. With a heavyweight, it seems like it's another level.
No, he definitely packs a punch at heavyweight, which is what I wanted to see. We didn't get to see anything of that against Gane. We got to see any of that against him. So we kind of saw that Jones can strike as a heavyweight on the feet, But we also saw he can have some uncomfortable moments, His defense was lacking a little bit, and he was getting caught by Stipe. He didn't really look to be hurt, but you could tell he didn't want to be hit anymore. He was running away. There were times he was literally running away. What I will say, though, when that spinning body kick landed, I knew it destroyed Stipe's ribcage on impact. I knew as soon as it landed inside the arena that Stipe broke multiple ribs. For sure.
And the thing is, I'll tell from my experience, I was talking to somebody, I won't name names, but they were like, after Stipe lost, okay, fight a real challenger. But I maybe attribute that to a little bit of British bias on their part. But you have to give credit where credit is due, because that finish, that spinning wheel back kick to the body, which, as you said, shattered Stipe's ribs. It's like, good God, you don't see fighters, you don't see every fighter deliver that, especially at heavyweight. Deliver the way, deliver that kind of shot.
Just a little bit more transparent. I think people would be less concerned as to what was going on. But to hear fighters publicly speak on this, to hear fighters say that they found out online that their fight wasn't going to happen, to find out that they had to halt their camp, because of other sources that weren't internal sources, to me, that's just wrong when you're the one actually competing. So that's the part that, to me, not just as someone who covers this, but as someone who follows the sport and has for, almost 2 decades now, that really bums me out. And I get everyone, wants to talk about, the UFC, they control the whole market, whatever the case is. You could say whatever you want about the UFC, but at the very least, from a UFC perspective, they don't sugarcoat. They don't just randomly cancel a card and no one knows that. So
and no one knows why. Exactly. That's the thing. It's we'll always be transparent with the UFC, and it'll always just be a clearer picture. Even if there is a situation, we'll know why it happened. For these, we've had multiple canceled events now, and we haven't been given a reason at all. They tried to sweep it under the rug. How crazy is that? You're a major MMA promotion. You think we're just not going to notice?
Yeah, it's very strange.
They do understand. They have millions of followers across their social media platforms. You think people aren't going to notice when you just outright cancel an event and try to sweep it under the rug? I'm just kidding. They're just not going to say anything about it. Oh, actually, we're going to have Nav come and do a concert at the PFL World Championships,
which no one asked for, by the way.
Cool, appreciate it. Can you tell us what's going on, at all, with anything? You have multiple fighters online speaking out. You have multiple events being canceled with no word, and you're announcing that Nav is going to perform at the World Championship.
Simply put, I don't really have any words. I'm just truly disappointed. If this is all true, I'm just so disappointed. I feel like I wasted. If this all comes out to be true, I feel like I wasted almost a decade of my I guess of my following of the sport of MMA, and even giving him the time of day that I did, and it just really bums me out that it had to come to this, and I just feel bad for every person involved, and obviously my thoughts are of course with the victim, and it's just a dangerous and disgusting situation, and even though he put out the apology tweet at the time that we're recording this within the last couple of hours, I just feel so numb to this.
If this is all, McGregor is found civilly liable, if this goes to a higher court and it all comes out that, they still side with the woman. I mean, even if they don't, I mean, just the fact that this jury has found him liable. Zain, I'm not going to mince words, especially when you consider that we just talked about in the PFL story, you and Pat.
I was just going to say,
corporate end.
I was just going to say,
I think the UFC has to distance itself from Conor McGregor.
Yeah, he didn't reveal who he was in negotiations to fight, but if we're putting the dots together, given Tom Aspinall made a video of him running in the streets of the UK, saying that he's also in negotiations, I think we can put two and two together that the fight that the world.
Not to mention, like I just referenced earlier, Alex Pereira still needs to make one more title defense. Magomed Ankalaev is owed a light heavyweight title shot.
So yeah.
So hopefully this goes into the direction that, Zain, I kind of teased before. Jones has to fight Aspinall, Pereira has to fight Ankalaev, and okay, you boys win your matches, you get the super fight. The brand that he started. After his rise to superstardom in 16-17, he became the 2-belt champion, fought Floyd, and then he founded his own whiskey. And he ended up selling off his majority ownership, ended up selling all of his ownership. He was essentially a spokesperson over the last couple of years. But in the wake of the result of his civil trial for sexual assault, the company has decided they will not associate with McGregor anymore. And you mentioned, Zain, right before we start recording, they're now just going as proper whiskey.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So obviously very, very big news in the MMA space with an update to this McGregor story. And I think this is going to be a long line of removals, if you will. I mean, now you got boxing gyms in Ireland with murals of him that are being removed. I mean, if you're getting your own mural removed of yourself, it's a major problem. And he's as his picture is still graced on my wall. I don't know how much longer that's still going to be there. But yeah, it's definitely a bad time to do one of three things: A, be following Conor McGregor, B, covering Conor McGregor, and C, being a very, very disgruntled and very, very sad fan that feels almost gypped of what could have
I have a piece of advice for him, and I'm actually going to not use my voice for it. I'm going to use Bruce Buffer's voice for it. Oh, hold on. Move on. Seriously, move on. Why do you still want to pursue this? I mean,
there's only one reason, Tom, and there's one reason and one reason only.
Oh, hold on a minute. I think I know the reason. A second here. I think I know. He wants red pants.
Because money talks.
But guess what? The fight's never happening. It didn't happen in 2023. It didn't happen in 2024. Dana said he wasn't going to fight until 2025. And right now, I don't think we can actually think about Conor McGregor fighting until this legal situation plays itself out.
Well, do you think that's one of the reasons why Dana kept saying, "Oh, Conor will fight at the end of 2025"? I know more than you, and then this eventually comes out.
I hate to bring it up because last week I said, well, the UFC should make a fight with him, but then I added in that I wouldn't be surprised given that, the promotion is basically run by a man who slapped his wife on camera on New Year's.
And then you just mic dropped it after that. Yeah, it's true.
But the question I was going to have, and I guess it kind of connects with that, is McGregor going to lose a lot of money and public image from this that it's going to force him back into the octagon?
That's a good question, and I'm just going to put it simply: he does not care. He is worth so much money that
okay, thank you, because I agree. I don't think it's going to, because like you said, he's got all the money in the world.
He does not care. He does not care. And you may think he cares, but he does not care. Absolutely, positively, not even a little bit.
Michael, for the love of God, and I say this with all the love, just fight Max Holloway and then retire.
Yeah, fight Max Holloway, win the BMF title, and walk
about
away.
Conor. Gave no comment.
At least, at the very least, though, at least someone asked the question, and thankfully it was one of the.
Thank God, yeah.
And
thank God for Kevin Iole.
Yeah, and I was going to say, thankfully, he was one of the best MMA journalists in the business, so you can't complain there. But yeah, I mean, his response was in typical Dana White fashion. You had alluded to it before we went on the air. Of course, he's not going to say anything to disparage his biggest star. And at the moment, he doesn't have to.
He's going to turn this into a mini Bando's breakdowns and is going to fly this one solo. So, Zan, take it away.
Sure. So, here's the latest update in regards to PFL and Bellator. It's a very disappointing one. We've got Bellator champions Patricio Pitbull and Patchy Mix both speaking out and requesting the releases from the PFL Bellator banner, if you will. Pitbull, more specifically, would be interested in joining the UFC. And I just want to make one thing very clear. I cover the realm of combat sports as evenly as I possibly can. Whether that's the relationships I have within the PFL, within Bellator, some within the UFC as well. But in terms of a potentially slanted view, the only thing I can really say about this is I really do hope that Pitbull and Mix land on their feet somehow, some way. They're two of the best fighters in the world in the primes of their careers. And as they both alluded to in their own respective statements, I mean, simply put, they feel like they need homes. If they're not active, they can't support themselves in their careers, and in turn, are going to be unable to provide the best lives for their families. So I really do hope that the Bellator and PFL rectify this, because if they don't, the UFC is going to get two gigantic free agents if they can sign both of them. And as Dana White alluded to, it'll be very interesting to see how everything plays out over the next several months. But given the way Dana spoke about it at the post-fight press conference, I would not be surprised if Patricio Pitbull at some point in 2025 or early 2026 decides to make the jump and compete in the UFC, because I think he would be a threat at multiple divisions as well as his primary one. So I think this is all very interesting. I really do wish in some respects the PFL would be a little bit more transparent, whether it comes to this, whether it comes to other stuff going on inside the company. I just think they owe it to members of the media, they owe it to the fighters, and they owe it to the fans. So hopefully the PFL can rectify this in some way, because these two guys deserve to fight on major cards. Are ready to fight. They're so desperate that they want to fight on the road to Dubai card. Will that happen? Will that not happen? I don't know, but it's very clear to me, based on what they've said, that they deserve to get fights at some point in 2025, because again, the window of opportunity is so short, and they need to ensure that they're getting as much activity as they possibly can. And in the UFC, especially with the guaranteed 3 fights per year, they would be able to get that. So I really do hope that whatever decision they make financially, they can make the best decisions for themselves. And that's how I feel regarding this whole saga. Again, the story is ongoing, but it's very clear that Bellator and PFL fighters are fed up with some of the current business practices, and it'll be very interesting to see what 2025 brings to the table. 100%.
Hi, everyone. So this is a little bit of an interesting edit. Yeah, all of a sudden, like, this is a weird intrusion. You heard that scratch. What's going on? So let me give you the context. It's about 9 p.m. Eastern time. Zen and I had just finished recording. We had just wrapped up the promo. I was going into our Slack to get everything ready for post-production, and then we saw this.
Yep. So At officially 8:52 p.m. Eastern Time, Conor McGregor quote tweets a tweet from Michael Chandler reminding him about the Ultimate Fighter Season 31 Coaches Challenge and tweets the following: "It's you, rest up and stealing Michael Chandler's famous line. I'll see you at the top," tagging Dana White with the hashtag man of word. So
here's the full. Actually, can I give the full context? Because this is a couple of quote tweets that's happened.
Sure.
So it began with Conor tweeting a photo of himself training and drinking. I think it's Bucked Up drink. 19 KOs in pro MMA. That's not my business though. Laugh, crying face. Great chat, Dana. Love your thinking. Mike Chandler then quote tweets and says, "Remember in the cold tub during the coaches challenge, you said I'd be your 20th. Show up and try me." To which then came this tweet. I'll keep this short and simple. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it as well. But just to even hear the thought of McGregor Chandler even remotely being back in the news cycle makes my spine
to think
tickle a little bit, and I'm sure it does for you too.
Zan, to think. We enter 2024 with Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler being a central headline to what this year could look like. And just when we thought that it was pretty much dead entering 2024, it's gonna be a storyline now heading into 2025.
As I was saying when I was going to make the transition, just when I thought this Conor Chandler saga was going to be it and end off 2024, no, we're going to have more Conor Chandler talk in 2025, probably.
Yeah, it looks like it, because we'll probably end up leading the year with it. And there's probably it's going to be speculation for months and months and months as to what is even remotely going on with those two in terms of when they're going to fight, and just personally, because I feel like Chandler is in a similar boat where you're not going to hear from him for a while, and the explanation as to why is going to be very convoluted. So,
yeah, basically. All right. Next week, December 31st, New Year's Eve, is going to be the MMA Outsiders Award Show. So you look at our best of schedule, 3 things down now, 1 left. That is December 31st, the MMA Outsiders Award Show. Zan and I will sit down. We'll talk about some of the best fights, best performances inside the cage. And my hope is we'll be able to bring a few friends along, or at least one friend along, for us to sit down and do this show with.
That would be ideal.
So,
but yeah, stay tuned. Stay tuned for New Year's Eve to put an official bow on everything, and hopefully we can go. We'll go back into the well, and we'll figure out how well we did in 2023, and we'll try to encapsulate it into what is this year. But for now, stay tuned for that and so much more. So,
and then of course, episode 110 of the MMA Outsiders. The return, the start of 2025, will be on January 7th, so stay tuned for that. But for now, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network, youtube.com/ETV Network. Subscribe. Follow us across social media at MMA Outsiders ETB and at ETV Network. Of course, listen to the MMA Outsiders wherever you get your podcasts to take on the road with you. And shout out to our friends over at Playback. Here's some more great streams entering 2025. All right. That's going to do it. I'm Tom Albano. That's Zain Bando. We'll see you next week for the 2024 MMA Outsiders Award Show.
Cheers, everyone. Have a good one.
And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Have a good one, and we will see you guys soon.